Hey, Steel Watchers, it is mine and especially Eric's favorite time once more.
No! No!
Shush.
No!
Shush.
No!
It is, as you can tell from the screams of torture, it is time for us to start thinking about our top 5 episode for season 3. So, as
Our
always,
top 5 episodes episode.
Yes, exactly. That's how it sounds. That's what I meant. So as always, we welcome and encourage everybody else's contributions as well, because otherwise it's just the two of us talking. And I mean, like, we do that enough. So if anyone wants to submit their top 5 episodes of season 3, please do so. You can send them to the email. That's probably the most preferable spot to send them, so we can just compile them and make a list. And yeah, we will read them. Let us know whether or not you want us to say your name when we read it or not. And
what name you want us to use. If you want to be introduced as Lord Darth Vader. Okay.
I had a student who wanted to be called Batman once, so I did. So yeah, please send us your top 5s so that we can stretch out the episode and pad it. No, I'm serious. Like, we can include it with quality content.
Yes.
That's pretty much all I had to say.
As opposed to what we normally do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Welcome to SteeleWatching, the podcast for Remington Steel fans. I am Eric, one of your hosts, and I am frustrated that I still have 2 more weeks without the use of one of my limbs.
Who needs limbs? And I am Sara, and I am annoyed with daylight savings time and wish we could kill it with fire.
Yes.
Yeah. Our clocks
Let the
just
heart
went ahead of
attacks
close.
begin.
By the time this airs, well, it won't be, but yeah, an hour. I lost an hour.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah, look around your house. You might find it. Anyway, season 3, episode 15, Springtime for Steele. That's what we're going to be discussing today. But first, we do have a comment we wanted to share and respond to. It came in over Spotify, and quite frankly, we don't keep a real close eye on Spotify because we get very little listening done there. And so it is just, it's not a good platform for podcast listening anyway. So, I mean, if we did a top 5 worst platforms for podcast listening, Spotify would take at least 2 spots on there. But anyway.
That's where I listen to all of my podcasts.
Okay, you and I need to have a talk.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me read the comment here, and then we'll have some responses to it. And this was left, actually, I think the listener found our podcast not too long ago, because this comment was left specifically attached to the LG and Steele episode, which was from season 2.
Yeah.
So let's get into it here. This poster writes, "So many disappointing things said this go round. I literally stopped listening after this. From Eric not understanding why Laura would take 2 minutes to call her mom, to the discussion about if Rem would have been justified in shooting a man that had made several attempts to kill them and treated they would be dead by noon. I think this poster's a victim of auto incorrect. It's supposed to be threatened. This really doesn't feel much like a fan podcast. Too much criticism of little things, like the drink recipe Remington Steele is trying to replicate. I look for another RA podcast." You want to make your comments first, and then I'll...
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of things to say, and I've been thinking about this, actually, because it's a fine line between... And to be fair, this episode in particular was one you didn't care for. So there might have been more criticism in this one than others, which is, again, I think that there is a fine line when it comes to any fandom between healthy criticism of something you love and just dragging all over it, right? But I think at the end of the day, if you don't love something, you stop watching, right? Like if you don't love something, you're not going to take the time to sit through it and complain about it. And not to say that if you love something, you should just sit around and complain about it. But I'm saying that, people that don't love something, people that stop liking a show, they just stop watching it. They don't continue to put themselves through that. And not that this is something that we're putting ourselves through, but certain episodes, it may feel that way because, Eric might not like a specific episode and I may have to drag him through it, and I might not like a specific episode and vice versa. So there are going to be times when, maybe we're a little more critical about the show than others, but I think it would be really boring as a podcast to listen to us just sit here and praise every single thing that happens too. Like, I don't think that anybody would want to hear that, because at the end of the day, if all you're doing is sitting there going, oh, and this scene was awesome, and so was this scene, and so was this scene, I mean, you can, that's not really all that interesting. It's kind of like when you're writing a story. I teach this to my students when it comes to constructing like a story. You need conflict. If you don't have conflict, if you're just writing about what you did all day, that's not interesting. Nobody cares. So I think that we sometimes run into this sort of conundrum of, are you really a fan if you criticize things? Or are you really a fan if you love everything and don't have any criticism? And I think at the end of the day, for the most part, anytime we criticize something, it's either because we love the characters enough to think this is out of character for them, or it's sort of lovingly poking at some of the inconsistencies, like the drink recipe, right? Like we got a little far into the weeds with that, to be fair, but it was kind of fun to say, wait a minute, would you really use a stopper and a beaker? And like, it's silly. It's silly in the episode. So kind of like, poking at that silliness a little bit, I don't think is mean. I think we attempt anyways to, if we criticize something, not to do it from a perspective of like, we want to be mean because we don't like the show, but more of like this is kind of funny. Fred is different almost every episode. Let's poke a little at that, right? So I don't know. I kind of feel like some of that criticism is loving, and sometimes when we don't love an episode, it may be a little more less loving. But at the end of the day, we're still here because we love the show. Like I genuinely don't see myself as not a fan. If I wasn't a fan, I wouldn't take all this time to do all this. It's a lot of work. So I would quit. So those are my thoughts. I'll let you.
Yeah. Well, some of what this person writes are based on their opinions and perceptions. And, you can't criticize them for having an opinion and expressing it. That's fine. They don't understand why I would say what I did about Laura taking 2 minutes to make a phone call. That's fine. They don't understand that because they've got a different perspective than I do. So I'm not going to criticize any of that. I am going to say that, like you said, we are fans. We do spend a lot of time and invest a lot of effort and, dare I say it, money to do this. We wouldn't be doing that if we weren't fans. Even if it was a hate watch and we were doing a podcast from a hate watch perspective, we're still fans from that standpoint. We're fans of loving to hate the show, or whatever. And that's the thing about fandom, is that it doesn't have, it's not a checklist where, okay, you met this criteria. You met this criteria. You failed on this criteria. So you're not a fan. It's not a checklist. And fandom looks and feels different for every person. So, we all love Remington Steele, but the things that draw us to the show are going to be a little bit different. Now, there's going to be clusters in there. So, there's going to be people who really like it for this aspect. And then there's going to be a group of people who like it for some other aspect. And that's fine. That's the great thing about fandom, is that all of us can enjoy the show, but have different things that appeal to us about it. And it's the same with podcasts, because
that's true.
How many Star Wars podcasts are there? How many Star Trek podcasts are there? They're not all the same. The hosts take different approaches and have different focuses for each of those shows. And this podcast over here about Star Trek may not be to your liking and taste because it focuses on the tech part of it, the production, the optical effects, the miniature construction and design, and this, that, and the other thing, and I could, when I was a Star Trek fandom, that was me. That was the guy I was, and all the people that were there for Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, or for some other things, these conversations would get going, and you could hear them rolling their eyes. It's like, oh, are we going to do this again? But, we still could all share a common love for the show, and I could talk about the trinity of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. I could talk about the plots. I could talk about those things and enjoy it. But the thing that really got me going was the tech stuff. And so a podcast like that would appeal to me, and it wouldn't appeal to somebody else. So they don't have to listen to that, because there's other podcasts available that will appeal to them. And that's one of the great things about podcasts. Now, unfortunately, in the case of Remington Steele, there was only one other podcast for Remington Steele. It only lasted a short time. It's been out of production for years. So to this commenter, and actually to anybody listening, if you are listening to a podcast and it isn't what you want to hear, it doesn't take the approach that you like. If there's not another podcast out there that scratches your itch the way you want it scratched, start a podcast. Do it yourself. Create the podcast you want to hear. That's the great thing about podcasting, is anybody can do it. You don't have to apply for a license from the government to get a radio station and transmitter and spend tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this. You invest a little bit of money in some equipment. You invest a little bit of money in the services that are necessary to host and distribute the content. And it takes some time, but you can do this. Create the podcast you want to hear if the podcasts that are out there aren't what you want to hear.
And I mean, you heard it from Eric. Scratch your own itch, people. Go for it.
That's not what I said. Oh, you. Anyway, so yeah, I would just really, we appreciate the feedback from this listener, and we hope they continue to listen. We hope that we provide enough entertainment and enjoyment that this one episode doesn't truly chase them away. Because, I mean, after all, like you said, if you're watching your favorite TV show and they come up with a clunker episode, and I guarantee you that unless they only had 11 episodes and were canceled.
Firefly. Sorry.
Unless that's the show you're talking about, they have clunker episodes, or they have episodes that you think, yeah, no, that's not a good episode. But you continue to watch because you love the show.
And there's always going to be, like, I run into this all the time with, doesn't matter the fandom. You're going to have somebody that, an episode that is either universally loved or universally reviled by most of the fandom. And you'll have that one person that's like complete opposite. I love this episode, or I love this story arc. And everybody will look at them and say, are you insane? This was terrible. But like you said, everybody gets something different out of it, right? So I personally don't think anybody would hate us if we hate watched season 5. Because to be fair, that's how most of the fandom reacts to season 5.
Yes.
I'm going to end up being the resident season 5 apologist. I will, because
you heard it here, folks.
I'm saying right off the bat, because that's what I saw.
Go ahead and
first.
Package up those tomatoes in a box and send them to us, and then we can throw them at her, live on the recording.
Don't do that; they'll freeze, and then I'll get hit with frozen tomatoes. But in all seriousness, like that will be the like. I'm not going to love all of it, to be fair, but there will be parts of it where I'm going to be the one saying, no, I like this, or I don't mind this so much, because that's what I saw first, and that's what drew me into the show. So even at the show's lowest point, there's going to be stuff that I'm going to find to love about it. So, and a hate watch is, I think a true hate watch for something is very different than like, a part of a show that you loved that kind of jumped the shark a little bit. Like my friend and I hate watched the Twilight series. And that was bad. Okay.
Okay.
But we did it, like, we sat through all 3 of those movies literally just to dunk on them, which is a very different thing than watching something you love and going, oh God, now we got to sit through season 5. Okay, we'll get through it. It's okay. Let's do this. Right? So yeah, I do also appreciate the feedback. And I love that idea of like, if you don't get if we are not the podcast for you, if this is not the podcast you are looking for, then, definitely
move
do
along,
that, because that can only expand people's choices too. Right. And, and make there more stuff.
And if this commenter, or anybody else for that matter, starts a Remington Steele podcast, send us an email. Let us know about it.
Yes,
we will
please,
mention it on this show.
Absolutely.
We will mention it. So, all right. Well, I think we've finished our discussions on that. So let's get into the episode, Springtime for Steele. First aired on January 29, 1985, written by John Wirth, directed by Christopher Hibbler. Now, anybody who is familiar with Mel Brooks and the movie The Producers is already going to know from the title of the episode what it's about. Yeah. But let's go with the TV guide listing anyway. The crooked managers of singer Rocky Sullivan decide to kill their rising star when her success threatens their investment scheme. And like I intimated there, the episode is based on the 1967 film, The Producers, directed and written by Mel Brooks, which was, by the way, his directorial debut. The film is about a mild-mannered accountant and a con artist theater producer who scheme to get rich by fraudulently overselling interests in a stage musical designed to fail. And to this end, they find a play script celebrating Adolf Hitler and the Nazis and bring it to the stage. Now, you're going to say something?
I was going to say something controversial. I have a controversial opinion here.
Okay, let me finish this, and then, I'll let you. I'll let you stir the pot then. Now, for the film, Brooks won an Academy Award for the Best Original Screenplay. In 1996, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, and it placed 11th on the American Film Institute's 100 Years, 100 Laughs list. And according to the PB Files website, this episode originally had a working title of Rocky Horror Show.
I like that. That's good. That's
okay. Now, time to create problems and stir the pot.
I don't know that it's really that controversial an opinion. Maybe it is. I don't know. But I prefer the remake of this film. I am maybe one of the few people that...
I did not know they did a remake.
Oh, yeah. So in 2005, there was a remake. Now, to be fair, Mel Brooks was one of the screenwriters. So even though he didn't direct this one, he was still involved with the screenplay, which was largely the same. But the cast was Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick, which I love the two of them. I love Nathan Lane. Will Ferrell is in it. What's his face? John Barrowman, who is on Doctor Who. He's one of the actors in the musical. He sings Springtime for Hitler. Like, it's just, in my opinion, I love the original. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it. It's one of the few instances where, in my opinion, the remake outstrips the original. So.
Oh, in our earlier comments about Spotify, we probably just got this episode banned from Spotify because we talked about Hitler and Nazis.
I love Spotify. No, please don't ban us. But yeah, it's and I mean, like, that's kind of the whole point, though, is that they assume that this play is going to tank because it's so completely,
of the topic,
utterly offensive. Like, it's nothing that you would want to, and yet sometimes that's the stuff that usually gets the attention.
the interesting thing is, Springtime for Hitler, the play that they are ostensibly putting on, the musical, is almost a foreshadowing of things like the Airplane movies.
Yes.
Because it's done very sincerely.
Yep.
And that's part of what makes it hilarious.
Oh, completely. Like, it's farce, but they don't know it's farce. So that's why it's funny.
Yeah. So
and that's kind of what Rocky is, right? She's farce, but she doesn't know she's farce. So that's why it's That's why she's so entertaining.
Yes. Well, the episode begins with a musical mess. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes. We talked about this with Steve.
Yeah.
We see a tour bus with a large sign on the side reading The Rocky Sullivan Show and a large cutout of Rocky Sullivan mounted to the top. The voice of Rocky singing, "Hooray for Hollywood." But the instrumental portion of the music has been replaced with some horribly generic tune that doesn't even fit close.
So,
I mean, if they could have at least kept the same chord sequence so that the vocal was less obviously different, it might have been okay. But no, this is a
it's painful. It's painful in the
Oh,
ears.
it is.
Like, it hurts my brain. I have a question about the bus, okay?
Mhm.
Because this is a massive cutout that's standing on top of this bus. How does it get under bridges?
right there in my notes. Because
I got to tell you about a bridge in London, Ontario, that we like to call the Talbot Street truck can opener. And we call it this because even though there are, and I could show you pictures, signs everywhere, big, bright, yellow flippin' signs telling people what the clearance height is for trucks and other large vehicles every single year, usually in September when the students come back, to be fair. Some idiot gets their truck trapped under there because it does not fit, like large transports. They will not fit. How? If you're driving down the highway and you come across how does that bus? Anyway, that's my question about the bus.
Now, I did a little study on this here.
Okay.
Now, I couldn't identify the exact bus model, but using a similar bus, which would be the 1950s era GMC PD 4501 Cena Cruiser, it's going to be close in dimensions, I figure, just visually looking at it.
Right.
It was 134 inches tall. That's 11 feet, 2 inches. In metric, that's
I'm doing the conversion right now.
I forgot to do the conversion. I'm sorry. I failed at my job.
So wait, 11 feet you said?
11 feet, 2 inches. Yes. 134 inches tall.
Meters. Okay, hold on. 11 feet is 3.3. So that's 3.3 meters is the Talbot Street truck can opener. That's how much it fits. So, yeah.
Yes. So that's how tall the bus itself is. The Rocky cutout is at least life size, perhaps even larger and taller than life size. To me, it looks like it's actually larger than life.
Yeah.
So according to the IMDb, I want to call her Rocky, but that's not her name. Lynn Randall is 5'3". So even if it was only a life-size cutout, when we add that to the height of the bus, that becomes about 16 feet 5 inches. There is no way that is going under a lot of overpasses.
Well, it wouldn't fit under the Talbot Street one, because the Talbot Street one, the bus would get stuck even before the cutout. So
right. Now, for a lot of overpasses, at least here in the U.S., maybe in countries like Canada, it's different. But, when there's a height restriction on a bridge, there usually is an off-ramp that you can take that shoots you straight down onto an on-ramp so that loads that exceed the height of the overpass or the bridge or whatever it is that has the height limitation on it, they can get around it. But that's not always the case, because sometimes it goes into neighborhoods that are just kind of like spider's nests. You get in there and you can't get out, also known as Hotel California. But yeah, so that cutout on top of that bus, that's going to be a real issue because most bridges and overpasses, we don't have a federal requirement here in the States, but most of them are somewhere between 13 and a half to 14 feet. So yeah, we got a problem.
Good luck with that.
Anyway, so yeah, that would be a problem. Well, next we see the bus traveling through various areas of Los Angeles and Hollywood. We see landmarks. They finally end up at the Mission Civic Auditorium, where we can see from the sign advertising the Rocky Sullivan Show, Friday and Saturday, 8 and 10 p.m. It's sold out. Well, Rocky looks out the bus windows and sees the sold out sign, and she runs up to the front of the bus or the back of the bus where a couple of men are playing a game. Looks like maybe cribbage, I don't know. And she declares, "Hey guys, look, I'm a hit." And the younger of the two men looks out the window to sign and frowns. And the older man has just a totally stunned look on his face. Rocky hugs the older man, gives him a peck on the cheek, and leaves him stunned, out of breath, and telling the younger man to tell him this ain't happening. Well, the younger man, Brian, says to just relax, but it's clear both of them are starting to panic.
Yeah, they're not happy.
No. So Buddy, the older man, says, "I've seen a lot of crazy things in my time, but I never would have figured that broad for a winner. We're dead. You know that, don't you?" And then Brian insists that he'll think of something. And Buddy tells him he'd better think fast because in a couple more shows like this, well, Brian cuts him off, warning Buddy that he doesn't need to get this kind of grief from him. After all, Buddy is in just as deep as he is. And, he's in just as deep as Buddy is. And they just have to figure a way out of this to end her career fast. And Buddy isn't quite seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. He tells Brian that broad has got desire coming out of her ears. It's going to take an elephant. Tells Brian that broad has got desire coming out of her ears, and it's going to take an elephant gun to keep her off the stage. And Brian looks at Buddy, and without even the slightest hint of jest or sarcasm, asks, "Know where I can get one?" And Buddy's expression changes from panic to maybe disbelief.
Yeah, I don't know if you would feel the same way, but at that point when you realize that your partner is a sociopath,
yeah, maybe try to get out of there. Yeah.
Maybe rethink the partnership. Yeah, I don't know about you, but like and we talked about this with like the restaurant owners. When you go from, "Oh, that person didn't like my restaurant, I must kill them," like when that's your stepping stone. Yeah. Yikes. Things are not good.
No, yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, next it's night, and we see the agency limo driving through town. Inside, Steele is reminding Laura that the last time they saw Rocky, she was being stalked by a menagerie of literary sleuths. I like that term of phrase.
Yeah, I do too.
One of which turned out to be a murderer. And Laura tells Steele that she's promised that they would be there. And Steele snidely remarks, "Wonderful. That makes four of us. You, me, Rocky, and the piano player." Obviously, Steele is not expecting too much from this.
No. I would like to point out something, too. This is the first episode post-freeze, right? So it's interesting. And this is what I call kind of the portion of the season where Steele spends the rest of the season trying to get Laura to go somewhere with him, and it keeps getting thwarted by something. And I'm going to have more thoughts on that as we go on, but it's interesting that we've spent, and I know that we also talked about how some of the episodes would be rearranged with the alternate order, but I think in both orders, this episode would come right after the freeze no matter what. And it's interesting that this episode is the first episode post-freeze, and there's very little change in how they're interacting with one another. Beyond Steele trying to get Laura, I think he invites her to go somewhere, and the whole Rocky thing ends up derailing it. But yeah, I do kind of feel bad for him too, because he's and this is also this, like, when he says, "Might I remind you, the last time we saw her," that's here's some exposition in case you missed the first time Rocky was introduced. So
yeah, that's true.
It's done really well.
The thing is, if you've been in this kind of a freeze for a while and you agree to, okay, let's thaw it up a little bit, it's going to be a slow, uncomfortable process. You're not going to jump straight from the freezer into the frying pan. It's going to take a little while sitting on the counter to thaw a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and all the water coming
so
off
in
from
this
the
analogy,
ice. And
Steele and Laura are raw chicken. But I do think, though, that like we do see a bit of Steele overcompensating going forward to try to force that thaw, right? He's seen that the door is open a little bit. He's trying to like shove it open, and it gets awkward. Maybe not this episode, but going into other episodes.
Yeah. Well, after his comment, Laura is clearly irritated at his attitude, saying that 2 hours out of his life is not that much to ask, to which Steele retorts, "On the contrary, Laura, 2 hours of Rocky singing "Who's Sorry Now" is too much to ask of anyone.
I agree. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say I agree with Steele.
Well, Laura has a comeback. She reminds him of the many times that he's dragged her to film festivals of dubious merit, concluding that he owes her one.
Fair.
And perhaps realizing he's cornered, but not quite wanting to admit it, Steele merely says, well, perhaps. And then he suggests that, it would ease his suffering considerably if she would have dinner with him afterwards. Now, Laura doesn't want to appear to be too eager. She says, well, yeah, I suppose I could be talked into that. And grinning, Steele eagerly says, splendid, I'll make the reservation. So he picks up the mobile phone, punches in some numbers, and then after a pause begins speaking, telling the mobile operator that he'd like to place a call to San Francisco. And Laura turns to face him with one of those, you've got to be kidding me looks on her face. Now, Steele continues, telling the operator that he wants to be connected to Marty's restaurant. Marty's restaurant?
Okay. Like, first
come on. A more sophisticated sounding name, please.
Yeah, you could go to Real Cherche. No, but see, in all seriousness, you've got the entirety of LA at your disposal, which there are a number of wonderful restaurants you could go to. And also, I looked on Google Maps, okay? San Francisco is like a 6-hour drive. The concert starts at 8. Do they have a private jet we don't know about?
Well,
how are they?
I don't think so. But I'm trying to think, 1980, mid-1980s, there might have been commuter airlines running in the Los Angeles area back then. Or the Southern California area back then.
It seems an awful lot of effort to go through for dinner.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you're trying to impress somebody and more importantly, get them into a location where they don't have a whole lot of options as to where they can go.
Yeah, which I don't love that either. Because this is what I mean by trying too hard. Because she has shown herself to be open to the thaw. She agreed to dinner. Right? He's got that opening there. And he did this in season 1 too, but like you give him an inch, he's so insecure about where they are right now that he wants to, like you said, make it so that, oh, look, we're in San Francisco and it's really late. I guess we have to stay, rather than risk her changing her mind or saying, and whatever. It's just frustrating because if he was able to look at what she's agreeing to and really see it, it might work out better for him rather than constantly pushing the envelope a little further than she's willing to go. Right.
Well, one of our online listeners and viewers, as we're recording this, watching the live stream, says the point is to take Laura off guard, off her turf, and thoroughly away from anything resembling work. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
He wants to keep her off balance and in a place where she does not have a quick escape back to areas she's familiar with, back to work. Yeah, exactly. That's
what you do with a skittish cat, though, not what you do with your partner. Like that's how you catch wildlife. Yeah, I agree. But I think that he's coming from the wrong perspective with it.
Oh, well, yeah, but I mean, we can all agree to that, but that doesn't change his plans.
No,
I mean,
he's still going to do it.
He probably knows this too.
Throughout the entire rest of the season, this keeps going, right? He does eventually get her to San Francisco, and of course, it goes horribly wrong. But yeah,
Well, the thing is that this is probably the technique he's used in the past, and it's worked for him in the past. He's just not recognizing that, this situation, this person is different. And so anyway, after he tells the operator he wants to be connected to San Francisco Marty's restaurant, Laura says, San Francisco. And he grins at her, admitting that, yes, he's incorrigible, which, the clever rogue that appeals to women, right? Laura, that appeals to you, right? So into the phone, he says, yes, I'd like to make a reservation for 2. Oh, I'd say about 10:25. and then he gives his name, Steele. Yeah, yes, Remington Steele. And his name obviously has been recognized, and he's pleased with himself about that. After he hangs up, Laura questions his plan, saying, of course, we'll have time to go see the show, and then to fly up there, have dinner, and then to fly back. And with a mischievous grin and a flick of the eyebrows, Steele answers, who said anything about flying back?
I mean, when you're making your dinner reservation for 10:45, I don't...
Yeah.
To me, dinner is not like dinner and then breakfast. I like dinner and then you watch the sunrise. Like that's late. That is that's not dinner. That's either you're working nights and this is your breakfast, or you're pre-gaming before you go out drinking. Those are the only two times you eat at 10:45. The rest of the time, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Where are we here? Yes. Next we see the agency limo pulling up in front of the auditorium, and the entryway out in front of the building, the sidewalk area, it's packed with people. Laura and Steele get out looking at the crowd. They're confused. Steele suggests that, well, they must be in the wrong location, but Laura confirms, no, this is the correct place. And then Steele suggests that, well, perhaps Rocky is an opening act for someone, and then begins to ponder who it might be. Sinatra? Cyndi Lauper? The Eurythmics?
I'm trying to picture him listening to the Eurythmics. I'm really trying to picture him listening to the Eurythmics.
I'm trying to picture why he would even say Cyndi Lauper or the Eurythmics. I mean, if Rocky was any good, Sinatra might be a fit.
Yeah.
But Cyndi Lauper or the Eurythmics? No.
They're not anywhere close to the same genre or age range. And I think we sometimes forget that Steele and Laura are supposed to be in their late 20s, early 30s. So it would make sense not for him, because I can't see him listening to Cyndi Lauper or the Eurythmics. Although I would love to see him singing along to Girls Just Want to Have Fun while he's cleaning his apartment. That would be enjoyable. But you're right. She wouldn't open for either of those two acts. They're not anywhere compatible.
Yeah, stylistically, it's just all wrong. Yeah, just all wrong. So anyway, Laura looks at the tickets again and then says, Rocky is the only name on them. And Steele hesitantly asks if it's actually possible that all these people are really here to see Rocky Sullivan, our Rocky Sullivan. And perplexed and somewhat disbelieving herself, she says, well, stranger things have happened.
I can't remember when, but I have a question for you. If somebody randomly came up to you and handed you tickets to a concert for somebody you have never heard of before, would you go? Because I probably wouldn't if I didn't know the act.
Not necessarily. I mean, I would try and do a little bit of research on them to find out who they are, what kind of music they are, because
sure, but there's no internet at this time. So the research you could do on Rocky Sullivan would be pretty darn limited, unless you had heard, there'd have to be buzz or something written about her, because there'd be no other way. I've only had this happen once, and I did actually have this happen, but it was to a band I knew about, or my dad did. My dad randomly got handed tickets to see Chilliwack in Toronto once, and we went, and it was great. They're a Canadian band from outside of BC, if you've ever heard of them. But
maybe from a place called Chilliwack?
Yeah, literally, they are from Chilliwack, yes. But I mean,
amazing how that works.
We knew the band, and we knew a couple of the songs, so it was like, oh yeah, cool. You give me tickets to see them, I'll go see them. But if somebody just randomly handed you tickets and you had no way of looking up that artist or what kind of music they played, I would not take 2 hours out of my time to go and sit through it. I probably wouldn't either.
Unless, like I said, I could find out some information about them to see if they were the type of artist that I might find enjoyable.
Yeah, because I'm just kind of shocked because we know that he bought out the theater, but I'm shocked that all the people he bought out came.
Yeah.
That's what surprises me, because I could get a few people coming out of curiosity, right? Oh yeah, I got nothing to do tonight. Sure, why not?
Sure, yeah.
But everybody shows. Okay. It's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, next we see them going inside, and then we see a man pull up in a car into the parking lot, which is looks like it's at the back of the building or the side of the building. He gets out of the car, reaches into his pockets, and pulls out a name badge, which he clips to the lapel of his suit jacket. And then he walks to the back of the car, opens his trunk, and moves a briefcase to the side. We see a bundled shirt. He opens the bundled shirt, and we see a revolver.
He does your favorite thing.
He grabs the revolver and shoves it down the waistband of his pants in front, because that's what you do in the universe of television where gun safety isn't an issue.
No, you just shove it down your pants and hope for the best.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Oh, no.
Anyway, he closes the trunk, then walks around to the stage entrance door, which is, of course, open because why wouldn't it be? And he walks in.
Well, I mean, she's not Cyndi Lauper. Who's going to be trying to break in?
Yeah, but still, I mean, generally, they're not going to leave that unsecured and unclosed, or they're not going to leave it sitting open, unlocked, and with nobody. And that's the other thing. There's nobody there watching the door to make sure that the only people that come in are people who are part of the stage crew or the show or whatever. I mean, it's just, oh yeah, come on in, man. Yeah, everybody come on in, man. You know, so wrong. Anyway, in a dressing room, we see Rocky is getting dressed while a rather rotund, middle-aged cowboy stands and watches. After a moment, he asks if she's sure there isn't anything that he can do. And she says, yeah, you can zip me up. And after he zips her up, he tells her that he could send, I got written. I don't know. I must have been on medication this week. He tells her that he could send out, saying, you name it, you got it, little lady. Maybe he was offering to send out for food or something.
I think. Yeah. It's interesting. You said, I like your description better. Rotund middle-aged cowboy, because I just wrote heavy-set man with a Southern accent. But I guess maybe that's a little too general, because to me, yeah, I was thinking about this actually recently, because I have been through many of the states. Like, I've been through 22 U.S. states, I think, at this point. And every state has a different accent, which I don't know if people in the U.S. notice this, but I noticed it, because like going into Tennessee, I could barely understand what anybody was saying. No offense to anyone in Tennessee. You guys are lovely. It was a lovely state, but like try ordering a sub at Subway. I just couldn't do it. But then you go to New York or New Jersey or somewhere like that, totally different thing, right? Mm-hmm. And even if you just cross over the border from Ontario to Michigan or Ontario to Buffalo, the accent changes. Whereas in Canada, you've got the East Coast, which has its own very specific regional dialect, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, that sort of thing, Quebec, and then everywhere west of Quebec sounds the same. I'm sorry, but we do. Like, those are the three. So I find that very interesting that you can sort of pick out region, because it's similar to the UK in that you can go 20 minutes down the road and the accent changes. So you can sort of figure out where people are from based on how they sound. You can't really do that in Canada. You can hazard a guess. If they're saying, oh, what time is it? Oh, it's 3:30. Then they're probably from Nova Scotia. I mean, I can say that because my family's from, that's how my grandfather spoke. But like, other than that, yeah. Anyway.
So anyway, Rocky's distracted, and she picks up does she pick it up? No, she's got it written on her hand. No, it's written on her hand. Yeah. Yeah. It's a list of 4 songs, and that's her song set list. It's like
2 hours.
4 songs.
How?
Yeah. I mean,
who is she? Taylor Swift? Like, she's gonna.
In all fairness, that's kind of like a modern concert. You pay hundreds of dollars for a pre-recorded lip-sync show that lasts 45 minutes.
It really depends, because it
might be only 30 minutes.
No, with the Taylor Swift comparison, that Eras tour she was doing, and whether or not you like her, that concert was 3 hours long, and that's a lot in my opinion. But the set list is four songs. How? Yes. Most songs are 3 minutes and 40 seconds, something like that, right?
Yeah, unless you're the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, they could probably
get to 27 minutes.
Yeah, they could probably get to San Francisco if they stayed for 4 songs. Unless they're the Doors, okay? I don't see 4 songs being It's something that is she just going to sing them over and over again? Is she just going to repeat? Well, now I've done Who's Sorry Now. Maybe that's what Steele meant. Who's Sorry Now for 2 hours. The extended version.
That would be so painful.
It would be really, really painful.
And that was one of the things that really just turned me off for going to concerts, because even back in the 70s, I saw the Doobie Brothers at the Pit. Anybody from Eugene, Oregon, from the 1970s knows what the Pit is. So I went and saw the Doobie Brothers, and basically, yeah, you could have just put on their records and put a bunch of animatronics up there, and it would have been about the same thing, because all they did was play the album versions of things. And I'm from the old school of music where I've never been a huge fan of the Grateful Dead, but I do respect them because they'll take a song that was 3.5 minutes on the album and they'll turn it into a 20-minute jam on stage. And that's because the guitarist, he gets a minute and a half to do some improv here. And then the keyboard player gets some, and that's the way it is they let the musicians have a time to improvise and to show off their skills, and they just take the music and expand it. And to me, that's more like what a concert should be, and not just a drop the needle on a record. There you go. That's it.
I think it definitely depends on the act, because I know that currently Madonna is being sued. There's a class action lawsuit against Madonna because she shows up hours late to her concerts. Her concerts never start on time. And this is something that is not new. This has always been the case. Really? So basically, if she's set to go on at 8, she doesn't go on till like 10:30, 11 o'clock. And people launched a class action lawsuit recently because basically saying, like, we couldn't get home. Our way home was public transit. We couldn't get home. We had babysitters. This is... and basically she made some sort of statement like, well, this is how I always am, and if you don't like it, then don't come, kind of thing, right? And it's like, well, that's pretty disrespectful to your fan base who pay all this money and come to hear if a concert starts at 8, it should start at 8. But then you've got other acts. I think the phrase is biting the hand that feeds you. Oh, for sure. And she just figures because she's so famous and wealthy, she can do whatever she pleases, right? Yeah. But I've seen... I counted because one of my students asked me, how many concerts have you seen? And so I actually made a list and I got to like 40 at this point, which is a lot. So I can sort of pick between, and last summer we saw Alanis Morissette with Joan Jett opening for her, and like her or hate her, Alanis Morissette's most famous album, Jagged Little Pill, she recorded it all in one take pretty much when she made the album. Like there was no auto-tune. She didn't go over it again and again and again until the vocals were perfect. She basically recorded each song, and they took the demo to the record people, and the record, she didn't even have a label at that point. They had dropped her, and they listened to it, and they took the demos. They didn't even really tweak them at all. So when she sings live, I mean, yeah, she'll improvise and she'll do all kinds of things that are different, but like it's raw. It's as raw as it is when she recorded it, and it was good. So yeah, I definitely think it depends, but you wouldn't want to hear, I don't think you'd want to hear Rocky improvising anything. No. We just want to, get in and get out. in fairness, I think pretty much everything Rocky does is improvised because she just doesn't, she can't do anything the way it's supposed to. Well, she has to write the set list on her hand. You obviously don't, because most artists, they'll have a little piece of paper on the floor, right? But if you're, I think some artists have been known to write it up the inside of their arm. But, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Now, probably the best shows I ever saw were small local shows. A guy named Gary Ogan at the Euphoria Tavern in Portland, Oregon. That was the kind of thing that I enjoyed. You just go in there and guy with his guitar on the stage and just doing his thing. So anyway, after Rocky looks at her set list, she realizes she wasn't paying attention to the cowboy. No. And she says, well, hey, how about a kiss for good luck? And so with a starry-eyed, "Aw, shucks, ma'am" attitude, the man tells her that she don't need luck because she's got talent. And apparently he's got a tin ear. No, she needs luck. She definitely needs luck. She needs a lot more than that. She puts her arms around him, tells him thanks. And just as she starts to kiss him, there's a knock on the door. Well, frustrated,
the man releases Rocky and turns to the door saying he'll get it. And he opens the door, and it's a middle-aged woman standing in the doorway. It's the wife. Boom, 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 boom. And in the background, we see the man from the car who we saw earlier standing and observing. Well, the lady at the door, tells the man, Clinton by name, that she's been looking all over for him. And he says, well, you sure enough found me, sugar. Well, wife enters the dressing room, eyeing Rocky. Then Clinton, saying that if she was a jealous wife, she could be losing a lot of sleep wondering what's been going on in there. And, of course, Cowboy, annoyed at having been caught and not wanting to let on that he's been caught, disapprovingly tells his wife not to start that again.
How dare you accuse me of things that I've done and am currently doing?
That's right.
Right? Like, and poor Rocky, who's completely oblivious because she doesn't know.
like a scene from Home Improvement where they accuse Brad of doing something and says, why do you always accuse me of doing stuff? Well, did you do it? Well, yeah, but it's not fair that you accuse me. Why do you assume I did it. So, anyway, Rocky, who is obviously totally oblivious to the marital strife, strikes a pose and asks how she looks. And of course, Cowboy Clinton beams while his wife gives Rocky a haughty looking down the nose look. And then backstage, we see Buddy. He's peeking out through the stage curtains at the crowd while Brian is off to the side fretting. Now, Buddy is chomping on a cigar and he comments, talk about your meteoric rise to fame. I ain't seen nothing like this since I helped launch Patty Page. Oh, come on. Really, Buddy? You helped launch Patty Page?
Sure.
Now, Jack Crucian, who plays Buddy, was born in 1922. Patty Page's career began in the late 1940s, which would make Buddy in like his mid-20s. I just don't see any way he could have been in any sort of an important position within the industry to help launch her career. I mean, at best, he was in the building having a sandwich at the counter at the time. You know?
But I mean, like all of the people in this business, that's what they do, right? Like
exactly.
They'll exaggerate, like I discovered so and so, and okay, sure, maybe you saw them walking down the street, and they yeah.
And anyway, so Brian is very annoyed. He tells Buddy that he has an annoying habit of pointing out the obvious. Well, Buddy doesn't take kindly to the criticism, and he slowly turns to Brian, and with his voice low and intense and threatening, he says, look, 4 sold-out shows in a row. You said it was impossible. You said it'd never happen. You said that we'd be rich. And so Brian just loses it. He says, all right, listen to me. And then he gets himself a little bit more under control, and he tells Buddy, you tell Rocky to start out with the Helen Morgan number. You know, the one where she gets on top of the piano. And Brian turns, starts to leave, but Buddy grabs his arm and suspiciously asks, why? Well, Brian doesn't really answer the question. Instead, he just says, just do it. I'll take care of the rest.
I mean, you'd have to be a special kind of stupid not to assume that he has something nefarious planned.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he might as well be wearing a sign that says, I'm about to commit murder.
Like, make sure she's there, specifically there. Why? No reason. I just like to see her sitting. Like, when I was a kid, I sat down into an ant hole that had like those ants that bite you. And they bit me. I ran home. I had to be hosed off. It was awful. Mm-hmm. The next thing I did was I got my brother to come out to that spot. And I tried to get him to sit there. I said to him, I told him there was a cool cloud, but you had to sit in this very, very spot, this exact spot.
How old was your brother at the time?
I was about 10 and he's 4 years younger. So smart enough to know better. It's because he didn't do it. He was like, no, I don't trust you. Rightfully so. I didn't get him to sit in the anthill, but like,
that may not be age as much as it was experience.
Yeah, this is true. I look back at my childhood and think we were legitimately trying to kill each other. Like, we wanted each other dead. So this is the anthill, right?
Yes.
Come on, dummy.
Well, Brian, as Brian stomps off, Buddy's looking after him, and he's, one of those, I think I know, but I don't really want to know type looks on his face. And then he turns back to the curtain. And as Buddy continues to look out through the curtain to the crowd, the young man that we saw earlier getting out of the car getting the gun and looking behind the client's wife's back, approaches Buddy from behind. He steps over to Buddy, clears his throat to get Buddy's attention, and then tells him he needs to see Brian Hunter. Well, not wanting to get involved in a conversation with the guy, Buddy casually tells the man that you just missed Brian. Buddy moves to leave, but the young man puts his hands up against his chest, stopping him, and says, "Then I need to see you." And exhibiting a slight degree of anger, Buddy looks at the man and tells him, "You just missed me too." And he shoves the man's hand away and then walks off. Well, next we see Steele and Laura coming through the stage door toward Rocky, who spots them and runs over to greet them. Laura gives Rocky a kiss on the cheek, and then with a somewhat malicious tone in her voice tells Rocky that Mr. Steele has been talking of nothing else all day.
She's not wrong.
Well, she's not wrong. No, she's not wrong.
She's not wrong.
And Steele, with his usual fake sincerity and plastered on smile, tells Rocky that he wouldn't miss it for the world. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And of course, Rocky, totally oblivious to everything, is oblivious to his insincerity and sarcasm. She rushes over and gives Mr. Steele a big kiss, leaving a big smear of ink on his cheek.
Yeah.
Where did the ink come from? Was that from her hand?
Yeah, it must have been when she touched his face.
Okay.
I'm assuming she had her set list written on her hands, but she must have been pretty sweaty.
Yeah, except that, wouldn't you use a permanent marker? I mean, like one of the Marks-a-Lots. I don't think those would sweat off, would they?
They can, especially if they're not totally dry.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. It just seemed weird to me. Anyway, she apologizes for leaving the ink on his face, tries to smear it off, making it worse, and then she leads them into the theater backstage. As they're walking, and as Steele is trying to clean the rest of the ink off of his cheek, Rocky is, of course, chattering away. Did you see the crowd out there? You'd think Dustin Hoffman was performing. Of course, Dustin never looked this good, not even in Tootsie. And
I could be, maybe, I don't know much. Does he sing? Does Dustin Hoffman sing?
I don't think so.
So why would that be the reference you use?
Because she's Rocky.
Okay, fair enough. I would say you'd think Elton John was performing, or you'd think Queen was performing. You know what I mean? I would reference a band that would bring in a crowd, not Dustin Hoffman. That's I don't know. It's random. It's weird.
Yeah, maybe they just somebody had a Tootsie fixation and they wanted some way to get the movie referenced in there. So
could be.
And that reminds me, I need to.
Movie reference, we'd have to add that.
Yeah, I missed that. Oh no!
Hey, that's a good movie, Tootsie. You should, people should watch that one. It's a good one.
Anyway, Buddy walks up, greets Rocky. She introduces Buddy to Laura and Remington, and vice versa. After the handshakes are exchanged, Buddy tells Rocky that Brian wants her to start with the Helen Morgan number. And Rocky, who is apparently incapable of adapting, protests that she has her act memorized. No, she doesn't even have it memorized. She had to write it down on her hand.
Yeah, she doesn't have anything memorized. As we see when she goes out to perform and she doesn't sing that song.
That's right. Well, Buddy smiles at her and tells her that a little change of pace will keep it fresh. And Rocky argues that she should start out on a high note with her best song. Oh, if Who's Sorry Now is that the best one? Song.
Yeah. Ooh.
And it goes downhill from there.
Yeah, that's a long 2 hours.
Yes. Anyway, Rocky, Buddy says that she will just have to. No, Buddy says that she will have them eating out of the palm of her hands when the curtain opens up, the spotlight hits her, and she's sitting there on top of a piano. Well, Rocky thinks about it for a minute and then decides that, maybe Buddy's right. And then when she's got him hot, she'll swing into Who's Sorry Now.
Oh, no.
And Steele grimaces at the thought.
Yeah,
whether it's specific to the new sequencing of the songs or just the thought of having to listen to Rocky, who knows?
That would be, would be really funny if Steele and Laura someday did have a legitimate wedding and Laura secretly on the down low hired Rocky to sing it as their wedding band, and that was their wedding song.
Let the divorce begin.
Still better than season 5.
Yeah, that would probably be grounds for instant annulment or divorce or whatever.
I don't think any judge would argue too. It would be Your Honor, this is okay, granted. Yeah.
Anyway, Steele gives Rocky a kiss. Buddy gives Rocky a kiss, makes his departure, And then Rocky turns to Steele and Laura and says that Buddy discovered Vaughn Monroe. Again, as with Patty Page, the claim seems a bit suspicious because, like Patty Page, Vaughn Monroe hit it in the early 40s, specifically 1942.
I had to look up who that was because I didn't know. But yeah.
Yeah, so I suspect that math and critical reasoning are not high on Rocky's list of skills and talents because a reasonable person who knew anything would have probably questioned that claim. But anyway, just then, Clint and his wife, Betty, show up, and Rocky introduces them and Laura and Remington to each other. And Remington somewhat flippantly asks if they are members of the band. Yeah, right. Clint says, no, he's got himself a piece of that little lady, and it's one of the best investments he's ever made. And Rocky says, hey, guys, it's almost time for the show to start, so go grab your seats. Well, Clint leans over and gives Rocky a big old kiss on the mouth, tells her to break a leg, and Betty gives him a big old scowl and probably wants to give him a broken leg.
Yeah. Like, honestly, I know she ends up being the culprit here. I don't blame her. So, really? Like,
not really, no.
I obviously, again, I do not condone murder, attempted murder, anything like that, but Clint's a jerk.
Yeah.
He's a jerk.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, don't kill him. Like, don't kill Rocky. Just, divorce him and take him for everything he's got. It sounds like he has a lot of money if he can afford to buy out all the shows. So, just take him for everything he's worth. Don't kill anybody.
Yeah, really. And because, see, that is more enjoyable because the pleasure lasts longer.
You get to watch them suffer.
That's right.
You get to watch them suffer over like a long, prolonged period of time.
I'm not cruel and evil. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to make you suffer for the rest of your life.
And the best revenge is living well, right? So, she should take the money and run. Like, just enjoy spending it. And, yeah. It's better than murder, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. I had a question here from one of our listeners asking, and I missed this, but they ask, what is the purpose of the woman who pushed past Clint's wife? And I'm not sure that there was a purpose, maybe other than just to make it look like they were in a hallway and such.
I think it was just meant
I think it was just set dressing.
Yeah.
But I mean, there could have been another motive there. It could have been somebody's relative that wanted to be on screen, and so they got to be on screen.
Somebody won a contest.
Yeah, exactly. Well, next we as Rocky's leaving, Clint condescendingly tells Steele that that's showbiz talk. Break a leg. To which Steele responds, "Ah, yes, Boffo and all that." Next we jump to Laura and Steele sitting in their chairs in the auditorium. And the lights are dim. The curtain opens to reveal the band. And to the accompanying sound of a drum roll, the announcer excitedly announces, "Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Rocky Sullivan." And the pianist begins to play the classic Gershwin ballad, "The Man I Love," which it's interesting that Buddy referred to this as the Helen Morgan number.
Yeah.
Because I could not find any reference to a recording of "The Man I Love" by Helen Morgan anywhere. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but even according to the website Secondhand Songs, she is not listed as having done a cover version of the song. So it's interesting that he used Helen Morgan as the reference.
Is this another music change though? I wonder.
No.
Like, because she's supposed to sing the wrong. Well, no, I know that. But she's supposed to sing the wrong song anyway. So what if it was a Helen Morgan number and they just swapped it out for this? Well, no, then they'd have to buy the rights to that.
It's Gershwin. It's "The Man I Love." So I don't think they would have swapped. I don't think they would have swapped out something else for a Gershwin song.
Fair enough.
So, but like I say, it's interesting that he used Helen Morgan as the reference because there are actually more recent artists who had recorded it at this time and who would have had more name recognition with Rocky than Helen Morgan, such as Dorothy Lamour, Billie Holiday, Lena Horne, Dinah Shore, Helen Forrest with the Benny Goodman Orchestra, Sarah Vaughan, Peggy Lee, Patty Page, whose career he supposedly launched. or, or Ella Fitzgerald, Dinah Shore, Liza Minnelli. Any one of those would have better name recognition with Rocky than Helen Morgan, who apparently never even actually recorded the song. But of course, Rocky, who has the memory of a gnat, comes out singing and swinging to "Who's Sorry Now?" And I think it takes her a moment, but she realizes that the song she's singing isn't the same song that the pianist is playing. So, of course, she gives him a dirty look like, "You idiot." And then
she keeps singing it, though. Like,
exactly.
Proudly. This is what kills me. This is what kills me. She commits to the bit and doesn't, like, if it were any other professional artist who realizes this is their mistake would change it, would alter it, would start singing the correct song. Like, I saw a live this was on like a Much Music. It was a live performance, Def Leppard performing some of their music, and they launched into, I think it was Pyromania, and like they launch into the song, and 30 seconds into the first verse, Joe Elliott stops and he says, "F me, I forgot the words." and I'm killing myself laughing. I'm watching this like, no, it was Rock of Ages. That was what he was singing. He was like, "I've only been singing this song for 30 years. All right, let's try that again." Like, and they restarted. So it's like, you make a joke out of it, but then you change what you're doing, Rocky. You don't keep singing "Who's Sorry Now" when he's playing it.
Well, anyway. In reference to your Def Leppard story, I have seen it said by numerous musical artists that, after they've been doing so many shows and singing a song for so long, they just go onto autopilot.
Yeah.
And part of their brain is dedicated to just singing the song, but the conscious part of their brain is like, say, I needed to go shopping for something. What was that? Oh yeah, I need to get some new tires for my car because they're getting pretty thin. And their mind is really somewhere other than what they're doing.
Fair.
So
yeah.
Anyway, Laura grins in secondhand embarrassment. Steele predicts that it's going to be a long night, and as you said, Rocky just continues to proudly belt out the wrong song. Yeah. And then suddenly, a heavy ballast bag falls from the rafters, dropping onto the piano where Rocky would have been sitting had she had her act together and been sitting on the piano as Brian had instructed her.
Her stupidity saved her.
Yeah. Boy, that's bad when it's your stupidity that saves you. It
is, yeah.
Anyway, of course, we naturally presume that Brian is behind the so-called accident, as I am sure does Buddy think that. Anyway, Rocky reacts in terror. Steele and Laura react in shock. And the pianist simply looks befuddled at losing his musical instrument.
Anyway, that's a nice piano. That is a nice piano.
Yeah, it was probably an expensive piano, too.
Very, yeah.
Anyway, then we jump forward to the end of the evening. The theater's empty. And Rocky is apologizing to Buddy for not sitting on the piano like she was told.
Are you kidding me right now? Come on.
I mean, that's what you do. If somebody's been trying to kill you and you screwed it up and they didn't accomplish it, you apologize.
I'm sorry I didn't do the thing that would have gotten me killed. Okay.
Well, as she's apologizing, Buddy waves his arms back and forth at her as if to tell her, hey, it's no big deal that you weren't where you're supposed to be so you can get killed.
Yeah.
And he tells her, it's actually pretty fortunate that you weren't where you're supposed to be. And this is the first accident they've had on this whole tour. And of course, as they're conversing, Laura is off to one side looking at the cable that's attached to the ballast bag. And as Buddy is saying that it's their first accident, Steele walks in carrying a length of cable and saying, nope, wasn't an accident. The cable was sheared, as he holds up the end of the cable for everyone to see. Buddy asks to look at the end of the cable. And as he does, he looks around with the look on his face that, it's like one of those fake, I can't believe it. So
faux shock.
He asks, what's the deal? Is this some joker? And you were saying something?
just his faux shock, like his
Yes.
faking, oh my gosh, really? Somebody was going to do something bad? This is the first time I'm hearing of this.
And he trying to give the impression that he doesn't really have a clue what might be going on. He asks if this really means that somebody might be trying to kill Rocky.
Yeah.
And Laura confronts Buddy, saying, well, you tell me. You told her to change the order of the songs. You told her to sit on the piano. And if she had followed your instructions, she'd be dead. Not looking good for you, Buddy. But Rocky jumps in to defend him, saying, no. Buddy told her it was Brian who wanted the change. Okay, it's like nobody's ever lied and said somebody else said it when it was them. But okay, fine, whatever. Buddy, in somewhat of a panic, says, yeah, what she said. It was Brian.
And
Steele
this is the
asks
quickest anybody has thrown someone under the bus ever.
Yeah, really. Steele asks who this Brian guy is, and Rocky says, Brian Hunter is her other manager. So Steele says, well, maybe we should have a talk with Mr. Brian Hunter. And of course, just then Clint rushes up, his wife trailing, unhappy look on her face, maybe even more unhappy when Clint puts his arms around Rocky and with an inappropriate level of concern asks if she's all right. Well, of course she's not. She tells him that she feels like she's going to throw up. Laura suggests, somewhat generally, not necessarily to anyone in particular, that maybe someone should take Rocky back to her dressing room until she feels better. And Betty says, of course we will, as she grabs Clint's hand and with great prejudice removes it from Rocky's shoulder. And she puts her arm around Rocky and begins to walk her back toward the dressing room. Clint, seemingly frustrated at his wife's understandable behavior, more so than his own obviously inappropriate behavior, takes his hat off, hangs his head, and begins to follow his wife.
Yeah, how dare he get in between? What kills me is that he spends the whole episode gleefully trying to cheat on his wife and not showing any, like, I don't know, any awareness that there's a moral flaw in this action. Like, he seems completely oblivious to the fact that this is not okay behavior. Like, he's just,
not only is he oblivious to the moral flaw, he's oblivious to the social flaw. Because she's obviously put out his behavior. And even if he doesn't understand that she's unhappy with his lack of moral fortitude, that, okay, this is creating a problem for her. So maybe I ought to just do this when she's not around.
Yeah, right. Like, that's my point. He doesn't seem to be even willing to try to hide his efforts to cheat. It's just like, he's almost like a pouting toddler when she takes Rocky away from him. It's, oh, where's my cookie? She took my cookie. Like, dude.
I'm going to follow her till I get my cookie back.
Like, if you're going to cheat, be a bit sneakier about it, I guess. Like, not the advice I would normally give, but, you know. Like,
I mean, if you're gonna. Anyway, next we see Brian Hunter walking out of the theater at the Artist Entry, apparently headed toward the tour bus. But as he's walking, a long limousine rushes up and comes to a screeching halt. Man jumps out, approaches Hunter, saying that he wants to talk to Hunter. And of course, Hunter attempts to rush off away from the man. Man catches up with Hunter and grabs him, begins to drag him back toward the limousine. And all the while, Hunter's hollering, "Who are you? What do you want? What are you doing?" And the man shoves Hunter into the back of the limo, and then the car backs up quickly and peels out of the parking lot and down the road. Back inside the theater, Clint is on a payphone, looking at a piece of paper and dialing a phone number that is apparently written there. And after a moment, he speaks into the phone saying, "Let me speak to the entertainment editor. When will he be back? Monday morning? I got a hot tip for him. Tell him somebody tried to kill Rocky Sullivan tonight at her show." Rocky Sullivan. Of course, the person he's talking to on the phone obviously doesn't know who Rocky Sullivan is.
No, who would?
He seems to be a bit put out about that. And as he's talking on the phone, Betty comes up behind him, listening and observing. And then she slaps him on the arm, telling him, "Come on, Clint, I'm starved." Well, Clint isn't happy that she's out in the hall with him and not in with Rocky because, after all, there's a murderer on the loose.
Yeah.
What does he expect her to do about it? I mean,
I don't know.
She's
Put
presumably
herself
in no
in-
position to protect anybody. Does he want her to be a witness or
A victim,
be murdered
maybe.
along with Rocky? Or maybe
I was gonna say a
instead?
victim is 2 birds, 1 stone. Like if she's gone, but like the part of this that kills me is the call to the entertainment editor, right? Like even if he was there, okay, say he's there, someone tried to kill Rocky Sullivan at her show. Who? That's going to be the response. And even if he says,
Exactly.
"Oh, she's a singer, a rising star," he's going to be like, "Well, if nobody's heard of her, I'm not running the story." Like it's.
Well, they might give it an inch and a half on page.
Sure.
7,
Sure, if it's like an attempted murder, but like,
yeah,
it's not going to be like like next on Hollywood Tonight. It's not going to make those.
So anyway, he turns back to the phone and concludes his conversation with what you said about her being a rising star. Then he hangs up the phone and tells Betty that little lady needs our protection, and with venom in her voice, she accuses him of his nefarious deeds by asking, protection from what? Your publicity stunts?
Yeah.
And he asks what she's suggesting, as if he doesn't already know. And of course, she tells him that Rocky was nowhere near that falling sandbag, so she knows it wasn't a murder attempt, despite what he said on the phone, and accuses Clint of perpetrating the whole event, and saying that she wouldn't put it past him, after all the way he's been looking all goo-goo-eyed at her. And Clint, obviously not the sharpest knife in the drawer, finally realizes that his wife is onto him. And so he tries to excuse his behavior by saying that he's just trying to look after his investment.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So we jump to an office strewn with papers where the young man that we saw previously is making even more of a mess of the situation.
Yeah.
The door opens and Buddy walks in with Laura and Steele stopping at the doorway. The man pulls out the pistol that he had earlier, points it at Buddy, demanding to know who he is. Well, the man warns Buddy to not come any closer because he's a desperate man. Well, Buddy grabs a handful of papers from the desk and throws them at the intruder, managing to knock his arm in the process. The man reactively fires a shot into the ceiling, and everyone else dives for cover, allowing the man to escape. The trio get to their feet to follow, and the chase is on. We see Steele and Laura run out of the stage door, each turning a different direction to try to find the elusive, desperate man. And Buddy, who's a bit behind, calls out, "Did you get him?" And Steele tells him no and adds that it was impolite of him to shoot and run like that.
Yeah, he should have stayed and continued to shoot.
That's right. You missed. Try it again.
How dare you?
Laura comes back asking Buddy if that was Brian Hunter. Buddy says no, it wasn't. And Laura asks, well, if that wasn't Brian, who was it? And Steele asks, more to the point, where is Brian Hunter? Well, next we see Brian sitting in a chair in an office. He's clearly tense. And then we see another man sitting behind a desk who is the sort of man who would probably make most people nervous.
Yeah. And this is this particular actor appears twice. He appears here in this episode as Mr. Nash, and then he appears later on as Anthony Delgatti in the Santa Claus is Coming to Steele and Dancer, Prancer, Donner, and Steele episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And he's one of those character actors that you see in things, and he's usually playing a bad guy because he has that face that looks like he's gonna hurt you. Like he just, there's something sinister about his face. Mm-hmm. And it works really, really well for these kinds of parts because he barely has to do or say anything, and you're just sort of like on edge looking at him. You know, he's great.
Yeah, yeah, he's the kind of man who, when he asks, "How's your family doing?"
Yeah, you
really start.
Like, I'm going to call them. Like, they're probably dead now that you've asked me that. Yeah, exactly.
Well, he speaks to a third man by the name of Joseph, who we don't see at the moment, telling him to get this man some water, indicating to Brian. And Brian nervously declines, saying he's not thirsty. Well, Joseph brings the glass of water to Brian. The man behind the desk, who we learn a bit later is named Vincent Nash, assures Brian not to worry. It's bottled. Brian takes a drink with Joseph standing over him. Nash chastises Brian, saying he's been avoiding the man's phone calls.
Gee,
and Brian begins making excuses. Well, he's been pretty busy the last few weeks, in and out of town. And Nash pointedly asks, "You didn't get any of my messages?" No, his secretary must have thrown him out. Well, that's obviously a terrible excuse and an obvious lie.
Yep.
And Nash expresses to Brian that he doesn't appreciate having his intelligence insulted. And if that Brian doesn't want to do business with Nash, all he has to do is say so. Still nervous, Brian says that it's not that he doesn't want to do business with Nash as much as maybe Nash doesn't want to do business with him.
I'm kind of amused by the fact that Brian doesn't want to do business with Nash, obviously because his business is a scam.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really, this is a bad spot for him, because what can he say here? I don't want to do business with you because I'm scamming all of my clients.
That's right.
That's not going to go over well. And so he doesn't really have a choice, but he, you almost feel bad for him. You don't, because he's evil, but like you almost do, because,
Well, of course, then the other thing is that if he does admit that it's a scam, then Nash will say, okay, fine. I'm taking 50% of whatever money you bring in. I'm not an official partner, so I'm not, going to be hung out to dry on this, but I'm going to just take 50% and you're not going to do anything about it, because what are you going to do? Run to the cops and tell them?
Yeah. It might have been smarter to do that for Brian, because then because at least Nash wouldn't be trying to kill him when he finds out he's been screwed over. But
So after he says about Nash not wanting to do business with Hunter, Nash stands and begins to walk around the desk somewhat sinisterly toward Brian. Nash asks Brian, why would you think that? I mean, after all, he's not just in the sanitation business anymore. And as Nash continues to circle Brian in the desk, he continues telling Brian that now his businesses are into things like linens, health foods, movies. And if things go the way he thinks they're going to go in the next month, he's going to own a record company.
So, okay. Nash is a criminal, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is sanitation a euphemism? Because I'm trying to figure out how you could be a gangster and a garbage man. Like, I don't know how that lends itself to organized crime. So
I'm not sure either, but
okay. I like the fact that he wants to move from sanitation into linens, because that sounds like he's diversifying. Like, I'm just kind of confused as to what kind of criminal he is, because you get the impression mobster, gangster, right? Which usually means drugs or weapons, right? But sanitation? Does he have
I was going to say something, and one of our commenters here online watching the live stream, because they are a supporter and they get access to the live stream, says, yes, it's a euphemism for cleaning up, which is one of the things that I had in mind, cleaning up messes. But it could also just be that he started out, he's a mobster, obviously. And if he started out in the garbage business, and everybody's looking down on him just because he's into garbage as opposed to these other things, that could also be a factor as well.
Yeah. The linens thing makes me think of, I don't know if you've ever seen the latest, I know there was a ton of them, but the latest Terminator movie in the franchise, Dark Fate, which is supposed to take place directly after the first two and eliminate all the other weird sequels. The character played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator that kills John Connor, then decides to stay on Earth and kind of evolves a little bit. And then when they find him, he's sort of living a normal life. He's got a wife and a kid, and he runs a drapery business called Carl's Draperies. And there's one scene where he's like giving advice about like curtains in a child's room. And he's like, you don't want solid colors. You want polka dots or butterflies. And I'm watching this, like killing myself laughing because it's funny. But then I read in the trivia that this was something that Arnold Schwarzenegger was like passionate about, and he added that because he believes in butterflies or polka dots. Anyway, totally unrelated. But yeah, linens. He went from cleaning up to linens and apparently movies. So he's got a lot of interest.
Movies and then soon a record company. So see, he's moving from something that is looked down upon into something that is more respectable.
Except that Rocky, dude, have you? Okay.
He obviously
He
has
deserves what
not
he gets.
attended one of her shows.
No, he deserves what he gets. That's all I'm saying.
That's right. So after he says about owning the record company, he's back behind his desk and he asks Brian, what good's a record company without recording stars? And Brian desperately wants to tell Nash that he just doesn't understand. And Nash leans forward and puts his hand on his desk and says, Brian, you're doing it again. And Brian quietly apologizes. And of course, Nash dismissively says, accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And then somewhat casually says that Rocky Sullivan has got what it takes to fill an auditorium, and nothing can make Nash happier than to be personally involved with her career. And he pauses and then continues with a hint of a threat in his voice, asking Brian if he understands.
Has he seen her sing? Does Nash just have really bad taste in music?
Well, I don't think so. No, I don't think he's heard Rocky. I don't think he's seen her shows.
Yeah,
and
enough.
I think he's got some people advising him that probably either all they're doing is looking at the numbers, or they are really tone deaf.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do know that Nash is into garbage, so maybe that's yeah.
Well, and then there's the other thing that sometimes the album artwork sells the album.
That's true.
Despite what's on the inside.
That is true. That is true. Yeah.
So, I won't mention any album covers specifically. Cheryl Ladd, Linda Carter.
Well, I mean, the baby that was on the cover of the one Nirvana album, the little naked baby, the guy who was that baby once upon a time has tried to sue, claiming that damaged his life or something like that, which is a bit ridiculous because unless you go around announcing you were the baby on the cover of the CD, nobody knows who cares.
So. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, anyway, Brian is not totally dense. He understands Nash perfectly well. And of course, Nash continues, well, since you're her manager, and Brian interrupts and says, I'm only one of her managers. I have a partner. And Nash holds a pen up in front of himself and tells Brian in a very cold tone of voice, yes, you do. It's me. Nash calls Joseph over to stand by the desk, and he drops the contract on the desk in front of Brian. Then he steps back to the side of the desk, silently looking on. Nash assures Brian that it's all perfectly legal, 50% for Brian. And Nash puts the pen on the desk in front of Brian and the contract between the pen and the desk, making an ominous click, 50% for Nash. Brian hesitates and then, with a fear and panic in his voice, tells Nash that he can't sign it. Nash looks at Joseph, who's looking at Nash, and without saying a word, Joseph steps over to Brian, picks up Brian's right hand from the arm of the chair with his own left hand, and then with his right hand, he grabs Brian's thumb, twisting it back under the palm of his hand. Brian cries out in pain, and then after making sure Brian understands the message in its entirety, Joseph releases Brian's hand, grabs the other hand, roughly places the pen into it, and then tosses the hand and the pen down on the desk where the contract is. And with no further options, Brian signs.
Yep.
Back at Rocky's dressing room, Steele is telling Rocky that what they may have, what it looks like, might be an attempt on a. Steele's telling Rocky that what they have is what appears to have been an attempt on her life and a crazy man with a gun, and the odds are that the two are connected. Well, Laura, somewhat understandably, condescendingly, says that, in other words, the man who shot at them may have also cut the sandbag. And Rocky is incensed, saying that she will kill the creep.
I like the fact that at this point she doesn't have enough good sense to be scared. She's just mad. Like, how dare you get in the way of my fame and fortune?
Yeah.
Good for her.
Film over. I'm sorry. I'm giving us
yeah.
a kind of a flippant response. One of our listeners, LZ, asked, well, what if Brian had been right-handed? My response was they had to flip the film over.
They probably would have just grabbed his hand and held it down and just signed it,
Yeah. Anyway, Steele tells Rocky that she shouldn't be overly concerned about it because he and Laura will ferret out what he calls the trigger-happy, inept murderer long before he can have another crack at Rocky. So, okay, based on what they know so far, it might be somewhat reasonable to conclude that their suspect may be inept. But I'm sorry, when someone is trying to kill me, I'm not going to be casual about it.
No.
I'm not going to bet on their ineptness. No. I'm going to have an appropriate level of concern, regardless of what I think of their skill level, because even the most inept would-be killer can get lucky.
And, I would argue that wasn't even all that inept. Like, the only reason it didn't work is because Rocky is inept. She screwed up. Like,
Good point.
It would have succeeded had Rocky not screwed up her set. So,
yeah, that's right.
Like, the stupid person is not the killer here, or the would-be killer.
That's right. That's right.
She just got lucky.
Well, when Laura tells Rocky that they'll get on it first thing in the morning, Steele looks at her with a sort of, oh, yeah? Look, he's, I guess, anticipating trying to save the evening with their previously planned trip. Yeah.
This is the singing telegram girls all over again. Like, somebody's trying to kill, and granted, both of them are irritating. I kind of like Rocky a little bit more than Tony and Terry personally. I know I'm sort of ragging on her a bit here, but I actually enjoy Rocky as a character. I think she's kind of fun. But yeah, you're not going to San Francisco, my friend. Chill out. And to be honest, I don't think Laura was ever going to go. I don't think that was going to happen. I don't think so. I think I don't know. I could be wrong, but she didn't seem enthusiastic enough to go along with. Like, that's like, you're right. You'd have to get on a commuter flight. You'd have to fly there. You'd have to. I don't know. I think she would have found a way out of it personally.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I'm ambivalent on that point, but anyway, Laura says no. Rocky's going to stay with me for the evening, and you, Mr. Steele. And she says this with a rather mean manner, tells him that he's going to have to leave his parts or his heart somewhere else for the evening.
I don't think it's his heart that he's thinking about right now, but yeah. Yeah, it's going to have to be left.
Rocky tells Laura that she's going to need her overnight stuff from the bus. So Rocky tells her, there's a red suitcase at the back of the bus. And Laura says, okay, she'll go get it. As she's leaving, Steele, somewhat annoyed, hollers after her, I'll call Marty, shall I? And of course, Laura doesn't hear because she's already gone. But as he's angrily dialing the phone, Rocky, curious, asks, who's Marty? And frustrated, Steele answers curtly that he's the patron saint of missed opportunities.
I'm curious because there's like a patron saint for everything. So I'm actually Googling it because I want to know if there is a patron saint of missed opportunity. Sorry,
I can't imagine there would be. I think that's just him being sarcastic.
You'd be surprised. There's a patron saint for a lot of things. Okay, so this says, while there isn't a specific patron saint solely for missed opportunities, St. Jude is often invoked for desperate cases and lost causes, which would include feeling a string of missed opportunities. So I'm going to say yes. Anyway,
let's go to our panel of judges. Judges, what do you say?
Yeah, judges. Survey says. Yeah.
Well, anyway, we see Laura exiting out the performance entrance where previously Brian was snatched from, and she heads to the bus. As she climbs in, walks to the back, slips through the curtain into the personal area where there's somebody who grabs her, putting his hand over her mouth and pointing a gun at her. Well, at the same time, Clint drives up, gets out of his car, and heads over toward the bus. He climbs onto the bus, calling out for Rocky, and he walks to the back of the bus, stopping at the curtain, and asks if she's there. Well, the young man with the gun whispers to Laura to answer. When Clint calls out to Rocky again, Laura makes a muffled response through the hand of her covered mouth.
So if he wants her to answer and he's covering her mouth,
Mm-hmm.
how does that like?
That
That doesn't sound suspicious.
Or like the teacher in the Peanuts cartoons. Wah, 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 wah.
You did say peanuts, right?
Yes.
Because
What did I say?
Cool. I heard. Never mind. Keep going.
We know where your mind is at. Anyway. Oh yeah, Laura's muffled response through the hand covering her mouth. Perplexed by the odd response, Clint asks Rocky if she's okay. And again, Laura makes a muffled response through the hand that's covering her mouth. Clint says that there's something he's been meaning to ask her or to tell her. And then he pauses and says, "Can I come in there?" Laura makes another muffled response, prompting Clint to ask if...
This doesn't prompt any red flags here. They're all stupid. Everybody in this tour is stupid. They're all dumb.
So anyway, Clint asks if he can come in there, and Laura makes another muffled response, prompting Clint to ask if she's feeling all right, because she isn't sounding too good. Another sound emanates from Laura's covered mouth. So since he doesn't seem to have permission to come in, Clint decides he's just going to do what he came to do and say what he came to say. So he tells Rocky that he knows it's going to sound all schoolboy crazy, but he loves her and wants to marry her. And Laura lets out with a muffled,
yeah. As well as everybody watching, because does he know he's already married? Like, you have
that's easily taken care of.
Well, sure, but like usually you do that before you propose to the other. I don't know. I've never.
But see, this way he's got his bases covered, because if Rocky says yes, all he has to do is divorce the wife. And if Rocky says no, he's still got the wife.
Yeah.
And he's still got Rocky, kind of. So, I mean, he wins both ways, right?
If that's what you call winning, sure.
Anyway, Clint continues to bare his soul, such as it is, saying, of course he loves her. Betty can see that. And he can't understand why Rocky doesn't.
That's not
he
a good
knows
endorsement.
He can make her happy. What?
That's not a good endorsement. Of course I love you. Even my wife knows. He puts that in his proposal.
Well, I mean, yeah. I guess it makes sense to him. But anyway, he knows he can make her happy if she'll just give him a chance. And he promises to give her everything his daddy gave his mama and more. But he wants an answer, and he wants it now. And Laura grunts out an But Clint, he said he wants his answer now, and he refuses to wait any longer. So he barges through the curtain, only to find a gun pointed at his face. The young man with the gun tells Clint, one move, and you're both dead. I'm a desperate man. As he's saying that, Laura gives him this kind of weird,
she's
perplexed look, like, what is this, your catchphrase?
Yeah,
what
another
is this?
catchphrase.
Did you trademark this line or something?
Yeah. The Great Corporation gave it to him.
There you go. Well, back in Rocky's dressing room, there's a knock on the door, and Rocky answers to find Betty with a bag of takeout. Betty's excuse is that she thought they might be working up an appetite. And Rocky says, well, they were just leaving. Betty asks if Clint is in there, and Rocky says no, but Betty, who has spotted a trouser leg sticking out from behind a door in the room, calls her a liar, shoves the door open, and discovers the leg belongs to Remington Steele.
I kind of find it funny that Betty clearly knows that Clint has feelings for Rocky and clearly knows that Clint would leave her in a heartbeat if Rocky agreed to it, and yet can't find any actual evidence that he's cheating on her. Because every time she comes in, nothing is actually happening. That's kind of hilarious in my opinion. Yeah. It's like, I caught you. No, I didn't. But I know you're doing it. I know you are.
Anyway, Steele stands, and Betty, who is flustered and embarrassed at her mistake, stumbles around on her excuse, saying that, well, Clint was going to park the car and then go up here, and Steele responds that he hasn't seen him. And Betty, still somewhat flustered, says, well, and then she pauses as if expecting more. But when nothing more is forthcoming from Steele, she asks, well, where is he? Well, Steele, Rocky, and Betty are headed toward the artist's entrance when a gunshot goes off. They rush out to see our young man with a gun running from Rocky's tour bus, jump into his car, and peel out. So, unable to do anything further, the trio heads toward the bus. There's a short time jump, and we see an ambulance drive away, revealing Clint sitting on the steps of the bus, his arm in a sling, with Betty and Steele standing next to him. Steele tells Clint that he's a lucky man, but Clint brushes it off, saying, it's only a scratch. Laura steps out from behind the bus, behind Clint, Rocky beside her, and Laura hands Steele a large book, saying that it appears to be financial ledgers for Rocky's shows. Rocky is panicked. She's concerned, saying Brian would hit the roof if he finds out that somebody got their hands on them. I mean, he's guarded these books with his life, and he wouldn't even let Rocky see them. And Steele assures Rocky that he will treat the books with the equal regard and whisks her away while carrying the book.
Like, Rocky, come on. I get that she's new to any sort of success because, Rocky.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a giant red flag if your manager won't let you see the books. If you're not able to see, like, how many stories have you seen of artists who have had their management or their record companies swindle them out? Lou Pearlman, who managed NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys, who turned out to be running a giant Ponzi scheme, like one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in history, who took all their money. Like, no, this is a giant red flag. Big one. Big.
Yeah. I mean, if the only thing that they are willing to tell you is just trust me.
Yeah. Right?
First clue, don't trust them.
I can't imagine, like, this might just be me, but I cannot imagine ever letting somebody else handle my finances, like, and give them complete control. I can't fathom that. I get that a lot of celebrities do it. They hand it off to their their assistant or whoever
or whatever. Yeah.
But I just can't. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't even let my husband, like, because you get these cases where couples get divorced and then there's like financial abuse where the husband has, like, or wife has put a stranglehold on the finances and the other partner can't even get away. Like, to me, there's just something phenomenally dumb about letting somebody have control over one of the most important parts of your life, like where your money is. Like, don't do that. Anyway.
Which is why, as we've discussed before, I have a real issue with these privacy laws that will prevent either spouse, from knowing anything about financial records if the other spouse is on the account and hasn't authorized them.
Yeah, because like they could run up all kinds of debt.
It's a shared obligation. It's a legally shared obligation. Yeah. And yet they're saying, yes, you have this obligation for this bill, but we don't have to tell you anything about it.
That's crazy to me. Like,
I mean, that's basically what Brian's doing here. There's this obligation, but you're not allowed to know anything about it.
And like my husband and I have my own checking account. He has his own checking account. Neither one of us have access to that because that's my, like, we see it as that's my money, that's your money. But we also split bills, right? So if something doesn't get paid, we would know. And we have a joint savings that we both put money into. So that part, like, we share. But I can't imagine not knowing how much money I had or where it was going or who was spending it. Like, that just seems like a really easy way to get yourself in trouble. And 9 times out of 10, that's what happens. They give somebody else control and that person squanders it. And even if that person gets caught, you can't get that money back. It's gone, right? Like, it's, Anyway, that's my rant of the day. Rocky, be smarter.
Yes, I get to rant next week. Anyway, next we see them walking down the sidewalk from the bus, Steele and Rocky. Rocky confesses that she's sure Steele thinks that she's always in trouble, but he assures her that Well,
Every time they see her, she's in some kind of trouble.
well, yes, but she doesn't want him to think that she is. Anyway, he assures her that as long as Sherlock Holmes steers clear of the case, they'll get by all right. And that's an interesting callback to Elementary Steel, since that it does assume that the viewer has seen and remembers that episode. So
it does.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Betty runs up behind them, calling to Steele, and she wants to know if he thinks that it's safe for her and Clint to go back to their hotel room. And Steele, somewhat presumptuously, assures her that since the gunman was after the ledger and not Clint, it must be fine. I think there's a little bit of, I think he's presuming too much there. Anyway.
Maybe he just doesn't give a crap what happens to Clint.
Or Betty.
Or Betty.
Anyway, reassured, she turns and heads back toward the bus. Back at the bus, Clint is speaking confidentially and apologizing to Laura, saying that back there on the bus, well, Laura puts her hand on his arm and assures him that she didn't hear a thing.
Okay.
I'm almost tempted to say ethics, but okay.
Well, I mean,
there's a difference though between saying I won't say anything, if it's not appropriate to say it, and saying I didn't hear anything. It's different.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where Clint is not their client, and what he does or doesn't do with Rocky, it's not really any of Laura's business, and she probably just doesn't want to be involved in the drama of it.
But
it's,
again, that's where I would say that what she should say is that, unless there's some reason why it's relevant to the case,
exactly.
I won't say anything about it. But don't pretend it didn't happen.
Because to be fair, I probably wouldn't say anything either. Because unless it's somebody that I know and want to protect, I don't want to get in that hornet's nest. Like, that's your mess. Sort it out yourself, kind of thing, right? But yeah, if it's relevant to the case, sure. But yeah, she should just say, unless it comes up and I have to say something. Yeah, your sleazy actions are,
because if she says I didn't hear a thing, and then it later becomes relevant, and she does have to say something about it, she's just made herself out to be a liar and untrustworthy. So,
well, I think Clint obviously knows that she did hear it. That's her wink. Yeah. I didn't hear anything. Wink, wink.
Yeah. Yeah. But still, there's still that credibility issue there. Anyway, Laura leaves as Betty returns. Betty starts scolding Clint, saying that he nearly got himself killed. Well, Clint blows it off, saying that it would take more than a little old pop gun to put him out of commission. Spoken like somebody who doesn't really know anything about guns. But anyway, that isn't her point. Her point is being that they don't belong there, saying that Hollywood people are sleazy. But Clint, from motives less than pure, I'm sure, insists that she deny ever having dreamed of being in show business. And that is fun and it's glamorous. But it isn't them, she says. Can't they just go home? And she gives him that little pouty lip.
You do. I mean, again, she tries to. And here's the thing. For the bulk of the episode, she's not the killer, right? Or the would-be killer. For the bulk of the episode, it is Brian attempting to off Rocky.
Yeah, I think so.
It's only at the end where she's literally at the end of her rope, and she's like, okay, if I can't keep my husband from wandering off with this woman, I'm just going to get rid of her. You kind of feel sorry for her a little bit here, because she's trying to reach him on a human level rather than complaining or bitching or whatever it is. She's basically just trying to say, like, this is not us. We don't belong here. This is not our life. Please, let's just go home and be us. And he's just a jerk. Like, he's just a jerk.
And she is absolutely right in taking this approach. Although I think she's missing a little bit on it, because obviously we know what the draw is for him.
Oh, for sure.
And maybe it's just that she doesn't want to bring that subject up. Yeah. But I think that by not mentioning, well, look, the only reason you're doing this is because you got the hots for her. So let's sit down and talk and work this thing out, because it's not going to last. I mean, yes, there's this whole thing about the Hollywood people, and that's not us. This whole glitz and glamour thing, that's not us. But she's not us either. I just think that she needs to loop that in at some point, but she's not doing that here. I'm thinking that might be a little bit of a mistake, but what do I know?
Well, I don't think anything she said was going to change his mind. His brain is firmly in.
Fried.
If I can just get if I can just get Rocky to love me, I don't think it would have mattered if she brought up Rocky, and I think she's afraid to because she knows, right? Yeah. She knows that he's not pure intentions, or, whatever. But if she brings it up, then he might confirm it and ask for a divorce, and that is what she doesn't want to hear. So
yeah, but it would force the issue, and maybe that would be better in the long run. But anyway,
totally would be. But it's one of those things like with little kids, right? When they're scared that there's a monster under the bed, so they just like cover their eyes. Like, if you can't see me, I'm not really here.
That's true.
That's what she's
and if
doing,
we don't
basically
acknowledge it, we don't discuss it, then it really didn't happen. Okay.
It doesn't exist. That's what it is.
Okay. Well, at Laura's apartment, Mildred is looking through the ledger, telling Laura and Steele that Brian and Buddy are making money hand over fist. 4 performances, 4 sold-out shows. And then she editorializes that she wished they had a piece of that action.
No, you don't.
As she's talking, Steele has been peering over her shoulder, and he points to something in the ledger, asking what it is. He picks up the book from Mildred and begins looking in closer detail and tells Laura to look at what he's seen. Well, Laura notices the listing. It's investors. And Steele confirms, and then slipping through the pages, begins reading. Clint Overton, 49%. Arthur McKinley Reynolds III represents a group of dentists from St. Paul, 49%. Laura Newbus, Susan Seddon, Martin Bowl, 49% each. And Laura, seemingly disbelieving Steele and thinking he must be reading it wrong, grabs the book and begins reading. Puma County Board of Education, 49%. Southeastern Ranchers Association, 49%. And Steele comments that it seems like everybody wants to own a piece of the rock, which is a reference to the slogan and marketing campaign for Prudential Financial that encouraged people to invest in its insurance and financial products. The Get a Piece of the Rock slogan and campaign was meant to symbolize strength, stability, and expertise.
It's also one of the wrestlers in the WWE. Can you smell what the Rock is cooking? Or what we refer to Newfoundland as. Just saying. But here's what I'm wondering.
What do you refer to people from Newfoundland as? Rockheads?
Well, that would be kinder than some of the other things that people refer to as.
Ooh.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm curious as to whether or not Mildred got there yet, because I can't imagine Mildred would miss this.
Yeah.
So I have to assume that she hadn't yet seen the list of investors, because that's what Mildred does. Mildred does the books.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the things I was going to mention, is that it seems odd that he would spot it, but she wouldn't. But yeah, you may be right that it was beyond the point that she had been looking at yet.
Yeah, so I think she was maybe just looking at how much money they had made, right? And that she hadn't yet seen the investors, and it was they were the ones that kind of went, oh, wait a minute, 49%. I also find it interesting that the people investing, because like there's a Puma County Board of Education, dentists, and ranchers, right? That seems very diverse, right? But when you think about it, it's interesting to see what groups will invest in. Like teachers, for example, the teachers in Ontario, the union, I guess, has a large investment in the Toronto Maple Leafs. There's we own stock in the Leafs, which is hilarious because I like the Montreal Canadiens. But yeah, so it's just kind of interesting to see the different groups that invested in this singer.
Well, financial advisors, that's one of the things that they do is they look for these businesses that are looking to get money invested into them. And as LZ says, diversification reduces risk. Exactly. But they go out and they find these. And so you do wind up with people who have investments in all these kind of unusual things that you wouldn't have thought of, because, Well, you're a rancher. You got an investment in a show? Well, yeah, because we are looking to invest our money in these different things. Some have high growth probabilities with maybe some high risk.
Yeah.
And so if they succeed and we make some really good money, but we've also balanced that with some less risky investments that aren't going to grow as quickly, but they're more safe. They're more stable.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not at all surprising that some of the other thing is that as a pair of con men, you want diverse investors because
for sure,
you don't
then
want
they don't talk to each other.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't want them getting together and comparing notes. So anyway, as they're reading all this, Laura's confused. And hello, Laura, dumb Laura. She says, well, you can't sell more than 100% of anything, can you? She's a detective. She should know this.
She would have had to say that, to lead Steele into mentioning the producers. I think that was just literally a we got to give Steele an opening.
Yeah, exactly. But as you say, Steele has the answer, the producers. And Laura, realizing where this is going, rolls her eyes and her head, mumbling, here we go again.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Laura, how could you not expect a movie reference at some point? Anyway, Steele gives the particulars. Zero Mostel, Gene Wilder, Avco Embassy, 1968. Hoping to make a fortune, Wilder and Mostel mount the worst possible play they can find. Springtime for Hitler. They sell 25,000% to the backers, expecting the whole thing to flop on opening night. And intrigued, Mildred wants to know what happened. And Steele summarizes it that they were very nearly driven to murder when the whole thing becomes a hit.
That's not surprising either, because you'd be like, things that are marketed as bad sometimes invite people to see them for that reason. Like, I don't know if you didn't see this, but the film version of Cats that came out a couple of years ago, that was awful.
That keeps getting updated and corrected and tweaked.
Well, no, this was
every 6 months they come out with a new version of it that fixes that mistake and that mistake and that mistake and that mistake.
No, this was the one that was universally panned by critics. Like, it was so bad and so nightmare fuel inducing that it was 2019, right? And everybody was just in agreement that this is a terrible movie. And you had a cast with like Judi Dench and just these Idris Elba, all of these incredible actors, and it's a terrible film. But because it was so bad, people started to go see it more. I went to see it. My friend and I, the one that we hate watched Twilight together. We went to the theater, and this was one of the most unique experiences I've ever had in a movie theater. We went to the theater specifically with the intention of hate watching this film. We were not the only ones. And it was like by mutual agreement, everybody in that room was there with the nobody was there to watch the movie genuinely. Everybody. It was so weird because it's not like we had agreed upon it before going in, but there would be scenes where people would call stuff out. They would yell stuff in the theater and everybody would laugh. There was a moment where Jennifer Hudson starts singing her big number, Memories, and somebody snored. They had legitimately fallen asleep and the whole theater burst out laughing. And at the end, everybody gave it a standing ovation. We were cheering. It was so weird.
Were you cheering the movie or the snoring guy?
Both. We were cheering just how we had all sort of come to celebrate how terrible this movie was. So I can totally see a musical production like that. Maybe not something called Springtime for Hitler, because that's really offensive. But I can definitely see a production like that they expect to be panned, getting a massive following because it's bad, a cult following because it's terrible. There are so many examples of this in film. Like The Room is another one. Hi, Mark. Not a good plan if you want to wait. If you want to lose money, what you do is what they did with Batgirl. They make the film and then shelve it. Yeah.
And I was thinking about this, and LZ mentions it, Rocky Horror Picture Show. And she's surprised that before they started the interactive, action intentionally, this was basically what was happening to their audiences. Yeah. So
there's so many examples of things that they thought would flop, but then become later hits on either VHS or DVD release, or become a hit because of some sort of community-based thing, right? So, I could definitely see this happening in real time if it were a thing.
So anyway, where were we? Yes. Mildred is shocked by the implication in which Steele is laying out that Rocky Sullivan is Brian Hunter's springtime for Hitler. The Rocky Sullivan show closes for lack of audiences, investors take the loss, and Brian and Buddy pocket the money. Laura leaps to the obvious conclusion of the plot. The show has been making money, so now the investors want to be paid their share of the profits. And of course, the problem is that there isn't enough money to go around, which explains why someone would be trying to kill Rocky. When Mildred asks Steele what he's going to do, he tells her the only thing that's sensible is to tell Rocky the truth. But Laura doesn't seem to be inclined to let him tell Rocky the truth, and he lets Laura sideline him.
Would you want to? I mean,
well, just because you don't want to doesn't mean that it's not the right thing to do.
No, I agree with you, but I can understand why neither one of them wants to do it, because as much as they didn't want to be at her show, they also, I think they genuinely like her and they don't want to see her hurt. So that would be a hard thing to do, would be to say, just so you know, your manager set you up for failure.
Yeah.
Now they want you dead. It would be a tough thing
to do, but
I agree that they should do it, but it would be hard.
Anyway, Rocky comes out of the shower dressed for a motorcycle ride.
Yeah, I just thought that myself. I was like, oh, she's going for a bike ride.
And she's all upbeat, thanking them for coming to her rescue again. She doesn't know what it is with her. Mildred offers that perhaps it's bad luck, and Rocky frowns, asking if it's really that bad. Now, Steele begins, but Laura jumps in, asking Rocky how she got involved with Brian and Buddy. Excitedly, Rocky explains that she went into an open audition for Brian and Buddy, who were looking for somebody who could put them over the top financially. And she beat out a few hundred girls for the job. No. And Mildred remarks that it looks like Buddy and Brian hit pay dirt with Rocky. And Steele quietly concurs. Introspectively, Rocky explains that all she ever wanted to be was a performer, that her father wanted her to be a secretary. He never liked her voice, and that no matter what she did, she couldn't please him. And Steele somewhat flippantly quotes the poet John Lydgate, saying, "You can't please all the people all of the time," although most people are more familiar with the Abraham Lincoln adaptation of that quote. You can fool some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all the people some of the time. No, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Anyway.
I didn't realize that was Abraham Lincoln, but I have heard that quote. So
yeah, he did the "you can't fool." You can fool some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time version. But John Lydgate, who was an English monk and poet from about 1370 to 1451, had the original version of that saying. So anyway, Laura is trying to soften Steele's somewhat cryptic and harsh message, telling Rocky that what Mr. Steele means is that she's not alone. Artists have been misunderstood throughout the ages, which is not really what he was saying, but okay.
Yeah, just because somebody doesn't understand you doesn't make you an artist.
That's right. And not pleasing someone is not the same thing as not being understood.
No, it is not.
Anyway, Rocky proudly describes waiting tables, stuffing envelopes, being an underwear model, and more just to pay the rent. It wasn't easy. People said she didn't have what it takes, but then Brian and Buddy came along and everything changed. They believed in her, and now here she is in the big time. Well, no one says anything. Nobody wants to bust Rocky's delusional bubble.
This is the most awkward moment because she's just so like, she's just so happy with everything.
She's just bared her soul.
Yeah, and that's rough. Like that sucks being the person to say, just so you know.
Yeah, you don't want to be the one to just have her open up her arms, bare her soul, and then just plunge the knife into her chest, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just that would be at this point it would almost be cruel.
Yeah, I think this is why I know there's a couple of Steel watchers that really hate Rocky, because when we did the Breath of Steel episode and we eviscerated Tony and Terry, in the comments there was a couple of people that were like, seriously, Rocky Sullivan is worse. And I personally like Rocky because, unlike Tony and Terry, there are moments like this where you genuinely feel for her. You have, like, there's some pathos and some vulnerability to her that I think makes her a likable character. Can she sing? No. Is she entertaining?
No.
No. Well, yes, but no.
Not intentionally.
Not in the way that she thinks. But then there's something like this moment where you're just like, I don't know, you just feel bad for her. You want her to be talented, because then you wouldn't have to say, just so you know they're using you. Like you feel bad.
Well, LZ's comment here really sums it up well. Rocky's story here is why I like her far better than Tony and Terry. And yeah, she's right.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
That story of hers is just, it's one of those things where you just don't want to see her have to face the inevitable truth that she's going to have to face at some point.
Oh, for sure. Because there are lots of people out there that want a career in some sort of industry and just don't have the talent or the skills that they need to be in that spot. And that's always really sad, because those people generally have a passion for it. That's why they want to do it. So you do whereas Tony and Terry are shallow and clueless and silly, and they're frivolous, and there's not really much to them as people. So yeah, that's kind of why I land on favoriting Rocky Sullivan over Tony and Terry.
Well, after her story, Rocky plops down on the couch, telling them that they've got to find that nut with the gun or her career is shot. And of course, Laura grimaces at Rocky's poor choice of words. Next, we see Brian chomping on his cigar and pacing back and forth in a nice office. Let's see. Brian hurries in and looks back at the door, looks out the hall, pulls the door shut in a hurry, and it looks as if he's hiding from someone.
Yeah.
And Buddy demands to know where he's been. Brian breathlessly says that he came up the fire escape as he begins pawing through the drawers of the desk.
Because that's
Buddy
totally
points
normal.
Yeah. Buddy points out that wasn't what he asked. He asked, where's he been? And tells him that they have a big problem. And Brian interjects, no kidding. Buddy continues, because turns out that friend of Rocky's, Steele, he's a private dick and he has their books. And Brian, seemingly not paying attention or not recognizing Buddy's concerns, says, great. Brian continues to paw at the stuff in the drawers as Buddy insists on knowing what Brian is doing. What is he looking for? And, oh, by the way, what's with the thumb? And Brian looks at Buddy with a crazed look on his face and announces that he's just sold 50% of Rocky's contract to Vincent Nash. Well, Buddy knows the name, and he slaps his hand over his mouth and asks Brian if he's crazy. Nash is about as dirty as they come, with his fingers in every dirty scam in town. Brian holds up his bandaged thumb that's splinted.
Yeah, I think he knows that.
And says, yeah, tell me about it.
He's aware.
Buddy shouts back that a broken thumb is nothing compared to what he's going to do to him when he finds out what they've done to him.
Yeah, right?
And then suddenly, in a calm that has to be born of terror, Brian assures Buddy that this is why they have to kill Rocky, because that's their only hope. And Buddy hollers that, no, that was their only hope yesterday, but now they've got no hope at all. Calmly, Brian explains that he's thought it through. With Rocky dead, they don't have to pay off the investors, and Nash's 50% becomes academic. Yeah. Can I just say that Brian is exhibiting some seriously socially unacceptable behavior here?
Yeah. Well, like I said, he went from zero to let's murder her on the bus.
That's
like
right.
This is, this is before Nash got involved.
Yeah.
You can almost see somebody who's already a really terrible person being driven to it when Nash got involved. But like he was on the let's kill Rocky train far before
before now.
So,
yeah. Well, strangely enough, Brian seems ambivalent about the plan, which
he has the whole way.
Well, I mean, it seems weird because obviously he's already realized earlier that this was where Brian had planned to take the situation ultimately. Yeah. But now suddenly, now that Vincent Nash is involved, now he seems to be having second thoughts about killing Rocky. It just seems odd.
I don't think that I think he was having second thoughts before that. I just think it was,
Well,
he was willing to deliver a message and to be able to say, I didn't do it. I just, like, he didn't get his hands dirty, but it looks like Brian is now suggesting a more direct approach. And Buddy, I feel like Buddy at least cares about Rocky a little bit. Even though he's willing to go along with it, he's not happy about it.
It just seems that earlier he was more accepting and less questioning of the plan than he is here now.
Well, Brian didn't outright say before, I'm going to kill her, make sure she's on the piano, right? So I think that was Buddy's way of telling himself, oh, he just, okay, I don't, maybe that was his way of like pretending that he doesn't know what he's asking him to do, right? If I didn't hear it, he's not planning it. It's his own plausible deniability, right?
Lying to myself every night.
Yeah. Oh, he's 100% lying to himself. But now Brian's like, we have to kill her. This is murder. We're planning a murder. We're doing crime, right? But he can't talk himself out of that if Brian has spelled it out in big red rom letters. So
that's true.
Like, this is Buddy now having to say, yes, we have to murder now. Like, it's time to murder, you know? Like,
well, Brian tells Buddy that all he has to do is make sure that Rocky is in her dressing room that afternoon, and Brian will take care of the rest. And it's almost as if he's telling Buddy, sure, you're setting her up to be killed, knowing that you're setting her up to be killed, but it's not like you're killing her.
Yeah.
And to quote somebody, there's a nuance here that escapes me.
Yeah.
But anyway, suddenly Brian spots something on the shelf. It's a cassette tape. And what he calls the perfect alibi. Suddenly the phone buzzes. Buddy steps over and answers it. Then after a moment, covers the mouthpiece and tells Brian that they have visitors. Brian panics. He's sure it's Nash. He wants to look at the books. Brian tells Buddy that they have to stall him. And then he runs out of the room, leaving Buddy to deal with Nash.
Brian in this episode, for those of you who are Canadian, who are listening to this right now, Brian is the Pokeroo. Okay, for those of you who don't know what the hell I'm talking about, Polka Dot Door was a children's show back in the 80s, 90s. And it would have like two hosts and then some puppets that talked, right? And every episode, towards the end of the episode, one of the hosts would excuse themselves for some reason or another. And this giant creature in a suit, like person in a suit, would show up as the Pokeroo. And he was like this big polka dotted animal thing. I'm not even sure. I think he was supposed to be a giraffe. I don't know. Okay. And they would have a whole conversation, and then the Pokeroo would disappear and the host would come back because it's obviously the same person. And the other host would say, you just missed the Pokeroo. And the host would be like, oh, he was here. I missed him again. That's Brian. Brian is the Pokeroo. Every time someone's looking for him, he's gone. He's not there.
Well, after Brian makes his way out and Buddy gives it a moment's thought, he puts the phone to his ear and begins to speak, pausing, and then in a more upbeat tone says, oh, yeah, send them in. Steele and Laura enter through the other door, with Steele holding out the ledger, telling Buddy that they've come to return this to him. Laura, accusing tone in her voice, says that it made for some very interesting reading. In fact, she found it fascinating that they sold over 500% of Rocky to various investors. And Buddy is, of course, shocked, absolutely shocked, taken aback, astounded. It's unbelievable. What are they talking about? Steele sets the book on the desk, opening it, telling Buddy to have a look. And Buddy puts on his glasses, and Steele begins pointing out to here and here and here. And Buddy looks at the information and scowls, and with feigned surprise and feigned lack of understanding, asks, this is illegal, isn't it?
You got to hand it to Buddy, okay? Because Brian, the only kind thing Brian does in this episode is try to give Buddy some plausible deniability in that he says, don't worry, I'll get my hands dirty. You just make sure she's here. But in doing so, it allows Buddy to throw him under the bus every single chance he gets. Like, anytime he's confronted with evidence that basically says they're trying to kill her, he's like, really? I had no idea. What a crazy random happenstance. Like, it's quite funny.
Well, I think Steele, who is an experienced con man himself, is I think he sees a little bit through Buddy's act.
He's got his number.
Laura's a little bit less perceptive here, asking if Buddy's really saying that he knows nothing about this. And Buddy explains that, well, Brian kept the books. Buddy, he's just the creative half of the team. And I'm reminded of the quote that goes something along the lines that the most creative writing in the entertainment business is in the accounting department.
Yeah,
which would seem to, again, implicate Buddy more than he realizes. But anyway, Buddy continues explaining how he couldn't have been involved in a scam. I mean, he's been a producer manager for nearly 30 years, involved with some of the top acts in the business. And ask any of them if Buddy Brokaw ever pulled a fast one. One that didn't help them, of course.
I do like that he's up to his ears in it right now. And he still says that. That's funny.
His phone buzzes again, and after a moment and some awkward stuttering, he says, send him in. He hangs up, and he asks Laura and Steele to excuse him to throw some cold water on his face. And he steps through the door that Brian previously had escaped through. A moment later, Vincent, Nash, and Joseph come through the front door of the office, and he, Laura, and Steele all exchange greetings, with Nash explaining that he's there to see Mr. Hunter. Steele comments that Mr. Hunter seems to be a very popular man, if not a bit hard to pin down.
Yeah.
Steele suggests that Nash might want to do with Hunter's partner. And Laura goes to the side door, calling out to Buddy. No answer. She knocks on the door, calls out again. Still no answer. She finally opens the door and sees that it leads not to a bathroom, but to a hall and a fire escape.
Yeah.
She frowns, turns to Nash, and asks if he would settle for them. Nash says, well, it depends on who you are. Now, Steele introduces himself and Laura, at which time Nash says he's simply there to tell Mr. Hunter that Mr. Nash came by to look at the books. Laura, recognizing the name, hesitantly questions, repeating the name, and Nash smiles, pleased that she's heard of him, and she says, of course, he's in garbage. And then she trails off. And of course, the smile fades from Nash's face. He's not happy to be associated with garbage anymore.
Yeah. Well, he's got a piece of Rocky, so.
Yeah, that's right. Which piece? Don't
garbage.
Anyway, Steele asks if the book he's looking for have anything to do with Rocky Sullivan. And Nash, again, is pleased, making an aside to Joseph that word spreads fast.
Oh, yeah.
And I've only been Hunter's partner for less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
Steele turns to the desk. He picks up the ledger and hands it to Nash, saying, it is his distinct pleasure to present him with said books.
He basically just put a big target
on
Brian Hunter. Like, Steele, he has to know. He has to know Nash is going to kill him.
Hey, plausible deniability.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, Nash begins flipping through the pages, and as he's becoming clearly more and more aggravated by what he sees. He finally looks up at Steele and Laura, a very unhappy look on his face. And finally, in a menacing voice, says, you mean for every buck I get? And he breaks off, but Steele finishes it for him. You pay $5. Sweet, isn't it?
Yeah, they're lucky he doesn't want to shoot the messenger.
That's true. In ancient times, that was the way you solved a problem. I don't like the message, kill the messenger.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, Nash throws down the book as Laura looks at him and with a subtle smirk tells Nash that legitimate business can be very aggravating, can't it?
That's ballsy.
Oh, it is. I mean, that's just asking, hey, shoot me now.
Yeah, right. Really, seriously.
Angrily, Nash hollers at Joseph to get the car, and he storms out of the room with Joseph trailing. Next, we're at the Westin Bonaventure Hotel and Suites in Los Angeles, room 423. Our mysterious young gunman knocks on the door of the room. Clint, arms still in a sling, answers. The young man raises his gun and points it at Clint, saying that he has to talk to Clint and that he's a desperate man.
Clint Clint sighing like he's just so over the death threats at this point is pretty funny. Right? He's got a gun point. He's just like, oh, seriously.
Again?
Come on. All right, fine. Come on in. Can I get some tea? Like,
Yeah. Well, back at Laura's loft, Mildred is knitting while Rocky is on the phone talking to Buddy. He's at the theater. He's got a room full of people waiting to rehearse. And every minute she isn't there, that room full of people sitting around doing nothing is costing Buddy money. Rocky tells Buddy that Mr. Steele told her to lay low until she heard from him. But Buddy knows how to get to her, and he reminds her that he's the one handling her career. A subtle suggestion that maybe Steele doesn't care about her career. And after all, she's a star. She's got a reputation to consider, not to mention 2 sold-out shows tonight. So let's go. You got a lot of work to do. Well, Rocky falls for it, agreeing to be right over. But Mildred, who's been listening, after all, she's Rocky's temporary bodyguard, grabs
poor
Rocky's
Mildred.
purse. Yeah.
Every time.
Grabs Rocky's purse as the latter's starting to head out, asking where she thinks she's going. Mildred isn't about to let her go anywhere until Mr. Steele or Miss Holt gives her the okay that it's okay for Rocky to go. Rocky, caught up in the hype, says Mildred just doesn't understand. This is show business, and Rocky owes it to her fans.
Mm-hmm.
Mildred asks Rocky if she owes it to her fans to get killed. And then the two begin maneuvering around the room. Rocky trying to get out, Mildred trying to block her. They both head toward the front door, but Mildred arrives first, blocking the exit. Rocky looks around, spies something of interest, and then says, "So, you want to play dirty, huh?" She turns and runs to the kitchen window next to the fire escape, then crawls out. Mildred attempts to follow, but apparently panics and freezes in the window. Rocky comes back in through the second window, running toward the front door as Mildred whines, "No fair."
I feel so bad. Every time they give Mildred a bodyguarding assignment, their quarry gets away. And poor Mildred, there's nothing anybody really could do here. You can't, unless she's able to physically restrain Rocky, she's going to leave. But it's just poor Mildred.
Mildred has two drawbacks in that kind of a job. First of all, she's not trained in it.
No.
Secondly, how to say this? She's not physically the best type for that.
No.
So we'll just leave it at that. Anyway, Mildred has called Laura and Steele in the limo, explaining that she's just not as agile as she used to be and that Rocky got away from her, headed toward the theater. Laura shouts that it's a death trap and orders the Fred of the day to hit it. Directs.
So,
yes.
Does the Fred of the day have to have stunt driving on their resume? Is that part of the?
Probably, yes. They've got an obstacle course that they set up and they send them out to try and.
And at that point, they're starting to think, maybe this isn't the job I think it is.
Well,
is your life insurance up to date?
Yeah.
Why?
Steele directs the Fred of the day not to spare the rubber. And Laura is surprised by the pedestrian nature of Steele's command.
Yeah, come on.
And he apologizes, stating that he can't be clever all the time.
Yeah, don't spare the rubber. Come on, no, he could do better. I agree with Laura.
So we see the limo racing through the streets. Then we see Buddy in his office, hands raised, confronted by our young man with the gun, who is demanding to see Brian Hunter. Now, Buddy tries to put the young man with the gun off, but he's not having any of it, demanding that Buddy do whatever he has to get Brian there. He has an account to settle with him. When Buddy tries to explain that he doesn't know where Brian is, the young man with the gun grabs Buddy's jacket with one hand, shoves the pistol into Buddy's face, and declares, I'm a desperate man. He declares that he knows what's going on and knows about the scam, that they found the worst singer they could find, banking that she'd close after the first show, and that they'd tell the investors that it's just a tax write-off, while Buddy and Brian ended up with over $500,000. Well, what the young man with the gun and Buddy don't realize is that Rocky had come into the hall and is standing just outside the office hearing this entire exchange.
And this is why, hard as it would have been Laura and Steele should have been the one to tell her, because
Exactly.
this is worse coming from it. Something like that is never going to go over well. It's always going to be hurtful. But if it's friends that are telling you, they're going to at least try to make it as easy on you as they can, as opposed to hearing this from a stranger.
And not only that, but they can console you, give you hugs and just sympathize and empathize with you, as opposed to this where she's basically all alone and in a sense being told, just, go away. We don't even care about you anymore.
Yeah, poor Rocky.
Even though they're not saying that, that's kind of the feeling that she's getting out of this. Yeah. So Rocky suddenly walks into the room, distracting the young man, distracting his attention, and giving Buddy the opportunity to snatch the gun from the man's hand. Buddy angrily orders the man out and declares that the young man declares that they haven't heard the last of him. Buddy comes back into the office, not looking at Rocky, sets the gun down on the desk, and then turns to face her. But Rocky is already running out of the room. Buddy follows her down the hall, and it's clear that Rocky is crying.
And it's clear that here Buddy has had second thoughts about hurting her.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, he's one of those people that he's kind of a contradiction, because he doesn't mind the notion that he's going to cheat her, maybe be complicit in her, at the very least, physical injuries, possibly murder. But he's a soft enough heart that he doesn't like to see her crying. It's a weird combination of personality things, but it's.
I think it makes some degree of sense, because if it's like you're cheating somebody out of money, and they never know that they've been cheated by you, then there's a degree of distance there, right? And even with the murder plot, there's a degree of distance in that you never actually have to stand. You're not the one pulling the trigger. Somebody else is doing it, right? But when he's confronted with her crying, that's that moment where he's sort of confronted with her humanity. Like, there's a person here. This isn't just an academic, like, we have to get rid of this problem. Rocky's a problem, right? But then she's crying and she's a person. Yep. And Buddy at least has enough of a soul to kind of recognize that and feel bad about it. Brian doesn't. Brian didn't care. But Buddy does. And I think that's the moment where he's like, I can't do this. I can't be a part of it. Whatever the consequences are, I'm not going through with it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Buddy grabs his handkerchief from his pocket to dry the tears from her face, and she's got her mascara running down, and she's just she's just pathetic to look at.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that negatively.
No.
It's just
I get what you're saying.
Buddy begins to confess that yes, he and Brian are a couple of rats. They got a little too greedy. And then, speaking more gently, he tells her, "Go home. Don't hang around the theater, because it isn't healthy for her." Though he doesn't explain to her what he means by that.
No, but I think she can put two and two together.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, she may have to take her shoes off before she can calculate that, but yeah, she will eventually figure that one out. He tells her to let him handle things, and that it's time he dissolved his partnership with Brian permanently. Rocky walks away. Buddy turns around and leaves the other direction. Rocky encounters the old man who works the backstage door, and we saw randomly earlier, and asks him, "Where's Brian?" Well, outside, the agency limo pulls up behind Nash's limo, Joseph leaning against it. Joseph demands that they move that pile of spare parts, as he puts it, because they're blocking the road. Never mind that, their limo is basically the same make and model as Nash's limo, and that Nash's limo is actually blocking the road more than the agency limo is, because at least they're off to the side. And so he's just talking big because he's got some big guy with a gun behind him, metaphorically speaking. But anyway, just then 2 shots ring out from inside the theater. Laura and Steele run toward the stage entrance as 2 more shots are heard. The young man, now without a gun, comes running out of the doors, but Steele knocks him down, pinning him against the stairs as Laura runs inside. Inside, we see Nash run out from the backstage area onto the stage and then down into the patron seating area, and Laura runs out the same way following. The chase runs out of the front of the theater, but Laura loses Nash as he has cut back down the side before Laura gets out the doors. Laura runs back inside from whence she came, while Nash continues around the side of the building toward the parking lot and his limo. He sees Steele pulling the young man without a gun along, then turns to run away, as does Joseph, though they run in opposite directions. The young man without a gun makes a move as if to try to escape, but Steele stops him, dragging him back down the stairs and into the artist entry of the theater. Back inside again, Laura comes upon Clint, dragging the body of Brian out of the office as Steele and the young man without a gun soon also appear. Clint, realizing that this doesn't look good for him at this point.
No, really doesn't.
And that he's got nowhere to run, lets go of Brian's body and lets it fall to the floor.
Yeah.
Laura, Steele, Rocky, and Clint, and the young man without a gun are now in the theater. Laura and Steele in the audience rows, Clint, Rocky, and the young man without a gun on the stage. Rocky begins to explain that she doesn't know what happened. She heard the shots, went to her dressing room, and there was a gun on the floor. Then someone was at the door. She thought it was the murderer coming back to get her, so she grabbed the gun and nearly took off Clint's head, he reports. When Laura asks Clint what he was doing there, he says that, like Rocky, he heard the shots. Astonished, Laura asks why then was he moving Brian's body if he didn't shoot him. Clint says he was trying to protect Rocky from being caught in a frame-up. Laura says that Rocky had no reason to kill Brian. But Buddy walks in saying that yes, she did, because before he was shot, Rocky found out that Brian had been using her for a scam. Notice, Brian had been using her, not we had been using her.
Buddy covers himself the whole way. I mean, he's smart. He's not stupid.
Although he kind of hinted at Rocky earlier, just a few minutes earlier, that yes, he was involved in it, but you're right. He didn't come right out and say it.
Yeah, can't prove it.
Rocky desperately says that, yes, but she didn't shoot him. Steele points out that, unfortunately for Rocky, her fingerprints are on the gun since she fired at Clint, so a paraffin test won't clear her. Clint, arm still in a sling, gestures with his head toward the young man without a gun, asking, what about him? Yes, says Steele. He hops onto the stage and walks toward the young man and demands that he tell everybody just exactly who he is. He is Arthur McKinley Reynolds III, an accountant from St. Paul. Steele dismissively repeats, an accountant, eh? And then slowly, from St. Paul. Laura has a puzzled look on her face until she realizes it's the dentists. Steele jumps on the point, stating that he had an excellent motive to kill Hunter. After all, for the previous 2 days, he'd been running around seemingly shooting at anything that moves. Laura points the gun at Steele. Laura points at the gun Steele raises in the air, demanding that the man admit that the gun is his. Well, the man admits that it probably is. He thinks so, but he's no murderer. The gun was just, well, he was a desperate man.
I'm sorry, but like, if you are aware that you're not willing to shoot or kill anybody, then don't bring a real, like, a toy. Bring a toy, right? Or something that looks, I'm just saying, like, he obviously, what I'm saying is if you are desperate enough to find a gun and bring a gun, you're probably desperate enough to use the gun. So, I don't know.
Yeah, but on the other hand, if you bring a toy, it's either going to look like a toy and nobody's going to take it seriously, or it's going to look like a real gun and somebody may take it a little bit too seriously, in which case you've basically just pointed a target on yourself.
I'm just saying it's not much of an excuse to say, oh, yeah, no, I totally have a gun, but I wasn't going to use it. I was just desperate. Like, okay, sure.
Yeah. Well, after he says, well, he was a desperate man, Steele remarks, so you said. And Laura says, on more than one occasion.
Even they're tired of his crap. They're like, okay, we get it. You're desperate. Can we move on? Yeah. You know?
Well, Arthur desperately admits that, yes, he was nearly at the point of turning that gun on himself. And Buddy scoffs, telling Arthur that he's a pretty rotten shot for a suicide. Desperately, Arthur begs for them to believe him. He explains that this was his first account. Yes, he'd had other accounts before, but this was his first account he was handling on his own, solo. His father did some checking up on Brian and didn't like what he found. Arthur had also tried everything he could, but Brian wouldn't talk to him. The gun was his last resort. He couldn't go home without the money, certain his father would have killed him. Clint jumps in to support the young man without a gun, saying that he had told Clint the entire story that afternoon back at his hotel room, which doesn't actually prove anything.
Quite literally the same I wrote in my notes. That doesn't make it true.
Yeah, it does at least indicate that he isn't improvising at this particular moment.
No.
And at the very least, it's a story he had ready to go should he need it. Mm-hmm. Or it could be the truth. But the story and having told it before, it doesn't prove anything one way or the other. Nash appears, calling it all a collusion. Steele greets him, suggesting that they were just about ready to get around to him. Nash says he called his attorney, who suggested that it might not look right if he didn't come back. He then suggests that it must be obvious that the two Hicks, Clint and the young man without a gun, are working together. Well, Clint doesn't take too kindly to the accusation, saying that all the young man wants is his money back, and all he wants is for Rocky to be happy. Laura doesn't quite buy Clint's story, pointing out that he stood to lose everything he had invested in Rocky. But Clint scoffs at the notion, saying, he's got more money than he knows what to do with.
I mean, if you're that rich, you probably wouldn't care. Right? Like,
you probably didn't get that rich by not caring.
But I'm saying is like he obviously didn't invest every penny that he has. He invested something and he'll lose that money. But if you've got hundreds of millions of dollars and you lose $2 million, it's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, it's a drop in the bucket. Plus, he knew he wasn't investing in Rocky for her sake and his career. He was trying to buy her. But
exactly.
Anyway, after a moment, the young man without the gun asks to speak to Laura a moment. He steps over to the edge of the stage, kneels down, and quietly says that just before the shots, he saw Buddy headed toward Rocky's dressing room. Laura looks past him for a moment and asks if he'd be willing to swear to that in a court of law. The young man without a gun frowns, asking, would his father have to know about that?
Wow.
Priorities. Yeah, probably would. Nash saunters over to Steele, who has been trying to eavesdrop on the exchange between Laura and the young man without a gun. And Nash says, it was the broad. He saw her headed toward her dressing room. He heard the shots. Steele asks if he's certain. Nash says, hey, why would I lie? Obviously, the question of a man used to people not questioning his lies.
Exactly.
I can think of a lot of reasons why you'd lie, Nash. Anyway, Steele steps over to Laura, and they begin to confer. She tells him that they may be onto something, and simultaneously they speak. Laura saying, it was Buddy. Steele saying, it was Rocky.
Ouch.
And they look at each other silently. Buddy then begins to spout off, saying, what about crazy Arthur here? After all, he went rushing out of the office, headed toward the dressing room, saying that they hadn't heard the last of him. Clint pipes up, saying that Arthur must have run into Mr. Prim and Proper, referring to Nash, because he saw him headed toward that room. Nash stalks toward Clint threateningly, saying that he'd better be able to back that up. Now Steele jumps up onto the stage and runs to get between the two men, and at the same time, Betty comes running up. Steele directs that they all just go home, lest everyone's tempers get to the best of them and cause further mayhem. Then Laura and Steele will contact the police, and everyone can tell their stories to them.
First time for everything.
Yeah.
Calling the police, I mean. Usually they just leave the dead bodies wherever they find them and assume they find them later. You know?
Of course, it might be considered a little bit too late, but okay, at least they did finally get around to it. Clint grabs Rocky, pulling her close and telling her not to worry because he won't let her go to jail, even if he has to sell everything he owns.
Oh, God.
And Rocky appreciatively tells him that he's such a sweet guy and kisses him.
I mean, you know you're clueless when you don't realize that this guy, like, I don't know. Some people, though, just genuinely don't know when somebody's hitting on them.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be that, but
yeah, she's Yeah. She is, very oblivious to reality.
Yeah.
Anyway, Laura is scowling. She tells Rocky to take the limo back to the loft and that she and Steele will have Mildred come and pick them up. Most of the crowd begins to leave. Steele gives Rocky the proverbial good news, bad news speech. Well, with Brian dead, she's no longer in danger. She is, in fact, however, the prime suspect in his murder.
Which is interesting considering they want to send her back to Mildred.
Yeah. Well, Rocky observes that, well, this won't do much for her career. In Rocky's dressing room, Steele and Laura are surveying the scene of the crime. There are 2 bullet holes through the bathroom door, and Laura ponders the fact that he was shot through the door. Inside the bathroom, Steele spots a boombox and comments that Brian must have fallen back, knocking the radio onto the floor, the killer then running out, dropping the gun in the process. Laura picks up the narrative, saying that Rocky came in, saw the gun, heard Clint at the door, picked up the gun, turned, and shot before she realized who it was. Steele concludes that Clint had decided to protect Rocky from what looked like a frame, so he dragged Brian's body out and was caught by themselves. But Laura says that something is nagging her, which Steele says is always a good sign. Does he? Does he really? I mean, usually it's Laura. It's settled. We got the criminal.
He's eager to get this. He's eager to get this wrapped up. He's still hoping to go to San Francisco. So.
Yeah, I guess. Anyway, Laura continues, wondering aloud how the killer knew that Brian was in the bathroom. After a few moments of thought, Steele turns, picks up the boombox, and plugs it in, saying that, well, it's because he was playing this. He starts the tape, and the sound of Rocky singing comes forth. Laura muses that if that tape was playing, and she pauses, picking up a black stocking from the floor, then she wonders if it's possible that the murderer thought that Rocky was in there. Steele supplies that that would mean that Brian was not the intended victim. But why would he be hiding in the bathroom listening to a tape of Rocky singing? Laura realizes that it could be that Brian was laying in wait for her, and if he was going to strangle her, the tape would give him the perfect alibi. Steele begins to understand if anyone had seen Brian leaving Rocky's dressing room, they would have heard her singing, seemingly establishing the fact that she was still alive when he left. And there's only one person that they haven't accused of heading into Rocky's dressing room, because that one person was already in Rocky's dressing room. Betty Overton.
Dun, dun, dun.
Laura and Steele rush out. And then we see the rabbit, Steele driving like a lunatic, weaving in and out of cars, as Laura hangs on in the passenger seat, and neither appear to be wearing seatbelts.
Of course not.
No, because then how would you get out in a hurry? Anyway, that reminds me. I was in the Guard. We would have inspections from various levels of the Air National Guard command structure, and we were doing one time, and we had what we called the 6-pack. It was a double cab, 2 front back seats, like is fairly common these days. Back then, it wasn't all that common, but we had 4 people in the vehicle, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and they called an exercise, and we go rolling up and throw open the doors, and one of the guys in the back seat jumps out. Except he's still wearing his seatbelt.
Oh, no.
Anyway, at the loft, Betty Overton has a hold of Rocky with one hand, a large knife in the other. She is ranting that she thought Rocky was just another passing fad with Clint, like the football team in Hawaii or the chain of disco roller skating rinks he was mixed up in. But no, he was in love with Rocky. Even she could see that.
I wish I had that much money that I could just blow it on random fads that I come across. Like, you know what? I think I like football this week. I'm going to buy a team. Well, okay. Yeah.
Well, as Rocky is trying unsuccessfully to move away from Betty Overton, she protests her innocence, insisting that she never did anything with Clint. He's not even her type. But Betty insists that it doesn't matter since Rocky seems to be his type. After all, Why else would he buy up every ticket for every one of her performances?
Ouch.
Rocky, of course, doesn't know what she's talking about. So, releasing her hold on Rocky, Betty explains that when Clint went down to the box office that first night and only 7 tickets had been sold, well, he couldn't let his songbird have an empty house, so he rounded up a crowd and gave them all tickets. Rocky protests that it's not true.
I have to think that this would be, I mean, it's bad enough to find out that your managers took you on hoping you would fail. In fact, planning on it, right? But then this part, like, this is the final nail in the coffin. This is the knowledge that she hasn't succeeded despite
Everybody's
Buddy
been lying
and Brian.
to her.
Like, everyone's been lying to her. Everybody's been, and like only 7. Can you imagine the price if Ticketmaster had sold those tickets? Like, how much he would have spent on? I'm just saying, but like, it just that's got to be so heartbreaking. This moment where she realizes that last shred, that last thing that she was hanging on to. Well, at least people bought the tickets. At least people wanted to see the show. No,
nope,
they didn't want to see the show. Like, that's ouch. That's harsh.
Yeah. Well, Betty ignores Rocky's protests, telling Rocky that she's going to climb out onto the fire escape and then jump. The story's going to be that Rocky was filled with remorse and couldn't take it anymore. Well, what if she doesn't jump? Rocky challenges. Well, and she says Rocky's going to commit hara-kiri, but that one way or the other, she's going to die.
So
First,
I
Betty,
looked up this reference. Just yeah, well, I mean, I wasn't sure if other people, like, I had heard that reference, but I this is interesting, is that I didn't make the connection between hara-kiri and seppuku. I know what seppuku is, the Japanese word for like a specific type of suicide where you sort of cut from the abdomen up. I didn't realize that another word for it was hara-kiri. Like, I didn't understand that they were the same thing. So yeah, it's a ritualistic suicide by disembowelment, and it was usually used by samurai as part of their code of honor, but has also been practiced by like officers in World War II to restore honor to themselves or families. So it was interesting because I was like, I've heard that term. I know roughly what it means, suicide. I didn't understand it was actually the same as seppuku. So.
Yeah. Well, from what I saw, there are some slight differences between it, but it's minimal. And seppuku is generally performed with a long sword, though a ceremonial knife can be used. And most Japanese people are apparently, or never use the word hara-kiri. They use seppuku as the term. I'm guessing hara-kiri is kind of something that Westerners latched onto and have used.
Well, didn't the Beatles
within the Japanese
use it
culture,
in one of their songs? Oh no, I'm thinking of
you're thinking Helter Skelter.
Yeah, sorry, wrong one, wrong thing. But yeah,
can you imagine if what was his name, Mr. Manson? Hara-kiri, hara-kiri, and hara-kiri actually, interestingly enough. Hara-kiri is a Japanese term that's used for ritual suicide, but hara-kiri was a baseball sportscaster. I'll bet that made for some interesting moments. Anyway, just at that moment, Laura and Steele come screeching up outside the building in the Rabbit. They jump out and begin to run up the stairs toward the loft. Inside, the chase has begun, with Rocky maneuvering to avoid Betty. In the hall, Laura and Steele rush to the door of the loft, only to find it secured. Laura begins pounding on the door, hollering for Rocky, who hears and begins screaming. Laura shouts to Rocky to open the door, but Rocky, who has managed to get to the front door, tries, but can't open it. Steele tells Laura, "The fire escape," and they rush off to make the alternate entry. Inside, Betty catches up to Rocky as she is running toward the couch, and they both tumble over it, causing Betty to drop the knife. As they struggle on the floor, Betty reaches for the knife and finally grabs it. She struggles to bring it down into Rocky's chest, but Rocky has hold of Betty's hands and is able to hold her off. At the window, off the fire escape, Laura and Steele see the two women on the floor, grappling. Rocky looking up and struggling to keep Betty, who is on top, from stabbing her. Steele crashes through the window, falling onto the floor, but giving Laura opportunity to come through behind him. Laura rushes over, grabs Betty from behind, pulling her off Rocky and sending her and the knife flying. Steele, on his feet now, rushes over and dives for the knife. Then, knife in hand, he grabs Betty's arms and holds her captive. Laura helps Rocky to her feet, asking if she's all right. Gasping for breath, Rocky insists she's never felt better in her life. Well, then it's night, and we are back at the theater. We see a large crowd of people entering the building. Inside, Rocky is in her dressing room, holding a long-stemmed single rose in front of her. Steele is standing off to one side as she contemplates. The old manager comes in and tells her, 5 minutes. Rocky shakes her head. She swallows hard, and then she tells Steele that she can't go on. Steele tries to encourage her, but she says, no, she's a fraud. That the only reason these people are coming out here to see her is because Clint paid for them to come.
And I kind of like, if I were Rocky, I would cancel the show.
Yeah.
It's not like,
yeah.
It's not like the people that are there are going to be ticked off that they didn't get their money's worth. They got the tickets for
they
free.
Didn't pay anything.
Right. The only person that would lose out is Clint, and who cares? Right. Like he's a jerk. So like I wouldn't go in front of an audience that I knew was only there because somebody paid them to be there. Like I don't know. I get that she loves performing and that's why she's conflicted here. But if it were me, I would just be like, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not.
But I mean, you can understand she feels like a fraud.
Yeah.
But Steele,
can't blame her.
who has never been impressed by Rocky, seems to have had a change of heart, at least in how he handles her, because he seems genuine when he tells her that once they see you out there, they will love you. And he insists, please believe me, they will. But Rocky is insistent that isn't the case. She insists that she lost it. I hate to interrupt such a sweet and tender moment with a snarky reality
she never had it?
alert, but yeah, she never had it. You can't lose what you never had.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think she means that she's lost her confidence. Like she's lost that part of herself that believes that she, could do this.
Right. You're probably right. Yeah. Steele gently tells her that there have been times in his life when he'd felt as if he couldn't go on, as though he had nothing left to live for, when everybody he trusted seemed to have failed him. And Rocky nods, reflecting that, yes, that is exactly how she feels right now. He puts his arm around her, pulling her close. He reminds her that people are not always able to anticipate or affect the way others treat them, which is perhaps what makes life exciting and frightening at the same time. But there is one constant you can control: yourself. No matter what happens, she can be the best Rocky Sullivan there ever was, and no one can do a thing to stop her. He concludes.
This is a really sweet speech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like, even though she's a terrible singer, it's a really...
that's putting it nicely.
But it's a really sweet speech, and I think it speaks to more than just singing, right? Because he's right. We can't control how people treat us. Mm-hmm. We can't control how we are perceived sometimes, or the way that we interact. And there's so much that's beyond our control, but what we can control is what we do about it, and how we behave when faced with those choices. And I like this. I like this because it's not him saying, oh no, you're a fantastic singer, we believe in you, because that would clearly be a lie. Mm-hmm. Right? But he's saying, you just go out and be who you are, and people are either going to like it or they're not. But it's how you show up. I like that.
Yeah. He concludes by telling her to put a smile on her face and be bold. She smiles at him and says, okay. Then they walk out of the dressing room arm in arm. Well, we see that the theater is quickly filling up to capacity. Backstage, Steele and Rocky come down the stairs where they meet up with Clint, Laura, and Mildred. Rocky gives some consoling words to Clint about Betty, who responds, well, yeah, me too. There doesn't seem to be a lot of sorry in his tone, though.
How does he look when he's glad? Right? He's real upset. He's heartbroken.
Yeah. Well, after a moment, he asks Rocky if she saw a look at that full crowd tonight, and she says yes, but she knows that it's all thanks to him. But Clint shakes his head and says, nope, not me. I only bought one ticket, my own. And Rocky seems dazed by this, asking if he means that all those people really paid real money to see her. And Clint grins, telling her that They must have heard about the attempts on her life, and they all come to see her death-defying performance.
That's not better. That's not better.
Yeah.
It's either I have to pay people to come to see you or they're here to see you die. Yeah. Neither one is good.
No. No. And, really, though, it's also a very sad commentary on humanity, if you think about it.
Yeah, it really is.
More so because it reflects the true behavior of so many people.
Oh, I mean, absolutely.
The death of others or the risk of death of others is just so entertaining to us.
I said at the beginning of this episode, would you go to see somebody just because you were handed a ticket? And I think we both concluded that unless we knew that we would enjoy the music, the answer was no. But I could see more people going. Oh, yeah. Not me. I wouldn't want to see somebody die, but I could see more people going out of morbid fascination than necessarily because they were just handed a ticket.
And I have this theory that a lot of people will probably jump down my throat over. Is that sports, and I'll put that word in sarcasm quotes, like boxing, UFC, things like that.
Hockey.
Not hockey. Well, hockey, yes, but not to the degree of boxing and, unlimited fighting and such.
Yeah.
I think part of the appeal is somebody going to get so seriously hurt that they're going to be maimed for life or they might die? I mean, I can see where these sports could eventually evolve to the point where it's like, okay, it's going to be, we're not going to say it's a fight to the death, but you might die in this, and we're going to have you sign this waiver that if you die, we're not at fault, but we'll pay your family X number of dollars. I can see these kinds of sports evolving to this.
Ancient Rome used to have gladiatorial.
Now, circuses.
To be fair, most of those entertainment, most of those weren't fights to the death. Most of them were like smaller spectacles, but you would have the odd, okay, these two are going to fight for the death and the crowd's going to enjoy it. So, yeah, I mean, that's part of that. I mean, partly modern day reality shows. I mean, they're not life or death, but there's an element of spectacle attached to that too, right? You want to see how people are going to react under certain extreme circumstances. So yeah, I can totally see that.
And they play into this by creating, because all those shows are created. They're fake.
Yeah,
there's no reality about most reality shows. No. And they pick one person out of the cast to create this evil villain that we want to see destroyed.
There's drama.
And they just feed onto that. We want to see them destroyed, humiliated, beaten into the dirt, and that's what they bank on. Anyway, as the group is standing there, the announcer can be heard saying, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, here for her second sold-out performance in a row, Miss Rocky Sullivan." And the band can be heard starting to play Who's Sorry Now?
Oh, no.
Steele tells Rocky to knock him dead. She gives him a kiss and then heads out onto the stage. Laura leans over and tells Steele, "They're playing your song." Out on the stage, Rocky greets the crowd to the sound of rousing applause. Steele, astonished and seemingly changing his tune from a few moments ago, bemoans the fact that Rocky may actually have an entertainment career after all.
Stranger things have happened.
Miller chimes in that she still thinks they ought to have a piece of her. Steele gives her a long sideline glance, telling her to bite her tongue. Laura asks if it's too late to catch that plane to San Francisco, to which Steele replies that it's never too late. Not with that song ringing in his ears. But no, it is too late. Yeah. As they turn to begin to leave, Rocky, who has been on stage speaking to the audience during this exchange, can be heard to say, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to dedicate this song to two very special friends of mine, Remington Steele and Laura Holt." And Remington and Laura hesitantly look back just as Rocky begins to speak their names. Then they try to make a break for it, but it's not to be. As Rocky begins to call them to come on out, Clint and Mildred rush over and grab Laura and Remington, pulling them toward the edge of the stage. They take a few short steps out onto the stage, take a quick bow, and then turn to walk off as Rocky begins to sing, "Who's Sorry Now?" And as she does, Steele admits to Laura that he has the answer for that musical question. And
Yep.
Laura, putting her hand to her forehead as if to relieve a headache, says, I'm with you, Mr. Steele, as we freeze.
Yep. Yep.
Any last words?
This is a fun one. I know probably not for people that don't care for Rocky Sullivan, but I like her. I enjoy. I don't think I'd want to see more than what we get, which is the two.
You don't want to have the Rocky Sullivan TV variety show on.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need to but this is fun. It's enjoyable. It's a good. I don't know if it's a great episode to have right after the thaw because there's no mention of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other than him trying to get her to go off with him to San Francisco. But yeah, it's it's a lighthearted sort of a romp. So I enjoyed it.
Well, in our online comments, LZ comments that the morbid humor, black comedy in this episode is well done. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Some good stuff.
So, yes, you're right. I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want Rocky to see to get a weekly television show.
No,
Absolutely not.
No.
Anyway, if that's it, we will remind everybody that we have a website at SteeleWatching.com. There you will find show notes, links to Amazon products like The Producers. We're going to try and have both versions linked there, and Tootsie.
Yeah.
And links to other resources such as
our Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram pages, as well as the Steele Watchers Facebook fan group, which is officially unofficial. It's not ours, but we endorse it. We're not doctors, but we play one on TV. So, come and join us, be part of the fun. And also, I'll start by teasing this early. In a few episodes, we have something special planned. So yeah, that'll be cool. We do.
Is this what we talked about at the beginning?
No, this is just nod. Just smile and nod. Talk about it after.
Because this is after that.
No.
Other
just
thing.
smile and nod. Just smile and nod.
Are you holding out on me? You got a secret?
No. Okay, I'm messaging you because you know what I'm talking about here. Anyway,
I'm thinking if what you're thinking about is what I'm thinking you're thinking about, that's already happened by the time.
Yes, it has already happened.
So yeah, I think, yeah. Well, okay, this is after that. So you remember we recorded out of order. Anyway, that's already scheduled.
Yes,
and this will be after that.
I know.
So,
I'm just teasing,
so you're
teasing
doing a Back to the Future type thing where you're talking about what happened in the past, because we're in the past recording this for the future, but what you're talking about is in the past from the future. So
I'm so confused.
She's talking about the cake.
That shush.
LZ, go.
Shush.
LZ, go away.
Shush.
You can't hear this. Anyway, okay, yeah. Anyway, well, next, Steele and the Family.
Okay.
And that's gonna be Sarah's. So,
okay.
Thanks for dropping in, everybody. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Eric and Sara here. Just a quick announcement to let you know that yes, we do appreciate everyone who listens, participates, and supports the podcast in whatever way you do. But we wanted to give an extra thank you to those who are so graciously giving to be monthly financial supporters.
We are making live streams of our recording sessions available to anyone who is a monthly financial supporter. So not only can you watch us live as we record our podcast episodes, you will be getting access to the raw, behind-the-scenes, unedited version of episodes before they get officially released.
And Sara, does that include our mistakes and screw-ups and our humiliating?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Every
it does.
single one of them.
Every single one of them, yes. So again, this is just an extra thank you to those who are going above and beyond. But whether you choose to become a monthly financial supporter or not, we still love you. We want to say we thank you for your support, your encouragement, and your feedback.
If you want to become a monthly financial supporter, please visit our website at www.steelewatching.com to sign up.